Chapter 1021. Wenjing and Zixiao, you're here. Where did you go? I couldn't find you. Zhang Pengji's armor was covered in blood. Some were fresh, some were dried and dark. She looked like she had just returned from the battlefield. The broadsword beside her had countless cuts. The edge of the blade was curled up, and there were pieces of flesh hanging on it. Zhang Pengji didn't feel anything. She held a few gold ingots in her left hand and a dozen strings of pearls in her right. She was surrounded by chests of all sizes. Each chest was filled with countless gold, silver, and jewelry. They were so bright that they were blinding. That was not the end of it. More soldiers came over with boxes. Looking at their strenuous movements, one could imagine how heavy the boxes were. Without exception, these boxes were looted from the private storehouses of the nobles and the royal family. Qiguanrang said, "The city wall has a nice view, so I climbed up to take a look." "What view is so nice?" Zhang Pengji held a dozen strings of pearls in her hand. Each pearl was round and full, with a warm luster. They were all top-grade pearls. The audience in the streaming room shouted, "If you came a little later, you wouldn't get a share." The corner of Qiguanrang's mouth twitched. Conquering the northern borderline and leading a strong army would be recorded in history. But when the Lord said that, there was a lingering sense of banditry. They were a regular army, not a mob. TSK. The northern borderline is really rich. If I had known, I would have been more ruthless. Zhang Pengji threw the pearls and the gold ingots back. Hearing the sound of the objects colliding, the audience's hearts were in their throats. What if the wastrel accidentally broke it? Fireworks Ji Yuan, streamer, put your hand into the box and stir it. Let me see if it's the same as the props in the TV series. It's such a big box. Is it possible that it's the same inside and out? From the bottom to the top, it's all real gold, silver, and jewelry? Isha Jixing. It must be real. This isn't a TV series. It can't be that there's only one layer on top and the bottom is all hollow. If the nobles of the northern borderline dared to deceive the streamer with fake goods, the streamer might drag them back from the king of hell and whip their corpses. The fairy queen's crimson. Dear Brainmaster, you've made a fortune. Can I buy on Double 11? POTUS Mommy. I'm looking for a streamer who can help me empty the shopping cart. Zhang Pengji secretly curled her lips. The north borderline would not put fake goods in the private storage of the manor. If the goods presented were fake, someone must have pocketed it. However, she was strict with the army, so no one would dare to do such a thing. If someone committed a crime, they would at most be greedy for a small fortune. If the water was too clear, there would be no fish. Zhang Pengji would not go overboard. His corpse had rotted to this extent, but no one collected it. This kind of ending is really sad. Each of his 9 princes had died a tragic death. Even he had ended up in such a state. Sad. Zhang Pengji sneered. In troubled times, human life is like grass. If I fail, I may end up worse than him. No matter what, at least the king of the north borderline would have a complete corpse. In troubled times, many people died without a complete corpse. Jiang Nongqin said, "My lord, your martial arts are prosperous. You will certainly live a long and peaceful life." Zhang Pengji could not help but laugh. Carry it down and burn it. Leaving a rotting corpse will easily cause an epidemic. It's not clean. The corpse of the king of the north borderline was carried down. Li Yun brought up another 4 corpses. Who are they? One was charred, another had livor mortis, and the other 2 were badly mutilated. Even their own mothers would not be able to recognize them. Li Yun, who was at the side, said, "According to identification, this charred corpse is the 6th son of the king of the north borderline. This is the 3rd son. Looking at the wounds, they probably committed suicide. His corpse was found by the soldiers in the prison of the north borderline. The other 2 are the eldest and 5th sons of the king of the north borderline." Zhang Pengji silently calculated in her heart. All 9 princes of the north borderline had died in battle. She rubbed her brows and waved her hand. Send their corpses down and deal with them together. A family was particular about reunion and tidiness. Thinking about it this way, she felt that she was quite kind. Not long after, Fu Wang came over to report. "My lord, all the people have been captured. Please make an inventory." In a place like Wangqing, The number of nobles might be more than the number of mosquitoes. Fu Wang handed over a booklet. In it, the names of all the nobles of the north borderline were recorded in detail. Following the names were the number of their family members. The total number was close to 15,000. Jiang Pengji glanced at it briefly and put it aside. Her expression was cold and almost emotionless. She said, "The army has surrounded Wangqing so tightly that not even a drop of water can trickle through. Now, even a mosquito can't fly out. If there are any fish that slip through the net, Fu Wang, bring your head to see me." Fu Wang cupped his fists and said, "This subordinate obeys." The deputy general followed behind Fu Wang and left. After walking far away, he asked hesitantly, "General, those people, have they all been killed?" However, children were different. Who knew what kind of person this child would become in the future? It is precisely because we are children that we are easier to be used by others. We will grow old eventually. If the young master of the northern borderline is a great seedling, won't it leave hidden dangers for future generations? Don't be fooled by Fu Wang's boorish appearance and reckless and unruly temperament. He was actually meticulous like dust. He had the intuition of a wild wolf and a pair of eyes that could see through the fog and see the truth. But that's just a possibility. The deputy general was a good, honest and loyal man. Fortunately, he wouldn't interfere with military affairs, so Fu Wang didn't deliberately correct him. Not even the slightest possibility. Fu Wang squinted and glanced at the place where the screams gradually stopped. He said coldly, "The Lord wants to bring peace to the world, so she won't allow any hidden dangers that threaten the peace to exist. Why do you think the Lord wants to slaughter all the nobles of the northern borderline and not even let their relatives go? Because the nobles of the northern borderline have more connections and financial resources than ordinary people. They can easily do things that ordinary people can't do. They are also a greater threat than ordinary people, so they can't be tolerated." Although the northern borderline was a barren land, there were also smart people among the nobles. If the nobles were compared to the brain, and ordinary herdsmen were compared to the limbs of the body, then as long as the brain was removed, the torso and limbs would lose the command of the brain. How much combat power could they exert in the end? If these people are left alive, the northern borderline will recover in at most 20 years, and they will become a serious threat. At that time, new and old hatred will add up. Guess how many innocent people will die? It will definitely be more than 15,000. Fu Wang said confidently, "War will not only hurt the people of the Central Plains, but it will also be a burden to the people of the northern borderline. If these people's deaths can be used to exchange for more people's lives in the future, they will die a worthy death." The deputy general listened and was stunned for a long time. After a while he said shamefully, "The general's state is extraordinary. I am ashamed." Fu Wang said honestly, "What extraordinary state? I'm just bluffing." The deputy general was dumbfounded. Fu Wang raised his hand and pulled out his weapon. He curled his lips and said, "The winner takes it all. If it was in the jungle, which wolf would not eat its prey because it is pregnant? If it does not eat its prey, it will starve to death. I really don't know how you have so much sympathy." The deputy general was speechless. After all, it was something that Jiang Pengji had instructed him to do. Fu Wang carefully compared the identity and age of each corpse and checked it again and again. He had to be careful. If there was a fish that escaped the net and came back 18 years later to take revenge and provoke a war between the barbarians and the Central Plains, how many people would die? Fu Wang yawned as he asked people to do the work carefully. To prevent people from being compassionate, Fu Wang sent out his trusted subordinates. Each one was colder and more ruthless than the other. Even if there was an outstanding beauty among the prisoners, they would stab her a few times without blinking until she breathed her last. Military advisor Wei? Fu Wang was busy. He did not expect an unexpected person to come to the tent. Observing the sky last night, I discovered that the stars in the night sky are strange. The destiny of the north borderline is not over yet. There seems to be a master of resurgence hiding. Fu Wang was so shocked that he lost all sleepiness. What? Master of resurgence? Fu Wang was stunned. Are you joking, military advisor Wei? Wei Ci lowered his eyes and said, "If you don't believe me, General Fu, you might as well check it out." Fu Wang asked, "Check? How?" When the left minister was young, he participated in the night bonfire and had intercourse with a shepherd girl and gave birth to a baby girl. The baby girl was secretly raised by the left minister and later became the legal wife of a member of the royal family who was down and out. The son that this woman gave birth to will be the person who will resurgence the north borderline in the future. Fu Wang was stunned. The left minister of the north borderline is Wu Liba. Wu Liba. Fu Wang hurriedly checked the register and found the page with Wu Liba's family. However, there was no illegitimate daughter as Wei Xi had mentioned, let alone any master of resurgence. Wait, I'll send someone to check. Military advisor Wei, please wait for a moment. Wei Xi was not in a hurry. He waited quietly, but his thoughts returned to his past life. The world had just been settled and the officials were worried about their children. Her Majesty wanted to appoint her eldest daughter, Chongqing, as the heir apparent but was repeatedly obstructed by the imperial censors. In less than 2 years, Her Majesty became pregnant for the second time, which was the blessed longevity. When she gave birth to the blessed longevity, the remnants of the Red Lotus group rose from the ashes under the leadership of one person. They even spread their teachings to the officials' residences. Chapter 1023. Although everything was under Her Majesty's control, and it was even the result of Her Majesty's deliberate actions, Wei Xi could not suppress the hatred in his heart when he thought of the assassin choosing to assassinate on Her Majesty's birthday. How could he not be? Just a little more, and both of them would die. He wished he could bear the risk for her. The person who led the Red Lotus group to obstruct Her Majesty was not anyone else. It was the fish that escaped the net, that Her Majesty had accidentally missed when she attacked the northern borderline and slaughtered the nobles there. Wei Xi was personally in charge of the interrogation, so he was very clear about the person's background. He was the grandson of the wise Wu Liba. Calculating the time, this person was only 9 or 10 years old. As he was thinking, the tent was forcefully opened by Fu Wang. Military Counselor Wei is really amazing. The old man who served Wu Liba confessed. When Wu Liba was 16, he really got a shepherd girl pregnant and gave birth to an illegitimate daughter to be raised by an old minister of the family. Later, Wu Liba secretly married her to a branch of the royal family. Fu Wang walked too hastily, his breathing was slightly hurried, and his forehead was covered in sweat. Although it was a branch of the royal family, it was just an illegitimate child of the king of the northern borderline. So there was no record of this person in the royal family. I almost missed this family. Wei Xi asked coldly. Have you caught the person? Fu Wang grinned. He said, when we sent people over, their family was about to escape. The few adults in the family saw that they could not escape and committed suicide. But didn't the military counselor say that they had a boy in their family? So we searched carefully. He looked like he was only 10 years old, but he was silly and did not have the aura of a master of resurgence. What about the child? Wei Xi asked. If this child was not killed, he would become a big problem in the future. Bring him here. Fu Wang shouted towards the outside, and a soldier brought in a little fatty who was tied up tightly. Wei Xi narrowed his eyes slightly, got up and walked to the little fat boy. He raised his hand and pinched his chin, carefully examining him. It's not this child. This child is fake. Wei Xi said with certainty. He was really replaced. Fu Wang was shocked. This is not true? The son of a servant. He doesn't look noble at all. His parents are slaves. How could he be the person Ci is looking for? Wei Ci had seen that fish that slipped through the net in his previous life. Even though the face of a 20-year-old youth and a 10-year-old child was different, it was impossible for there to be no similarities. Looking at this person's face, the past few generations of his family had been poor and lowly. It was impossible for him to be Wu Liba's grandson. Fu Wang's face darkened. Really? Wei Ci said. We'll know after interrogating this fellow. Fu Wang drew his sword and placed it on the fatty's neck, purposely intimidating him. Sure enough, the little fatty gave himself away. Damn it! Fu Wang's face turned green. His subordinates did not take their work seriously. As expected, he had to do it himself. He led a group of people to chase after them. After following the clues for more than 2 hours, they finally found the person hiding in a latrine pit in the wild. The latrine pit in the wild was not deep and was about the height of an adult. Fu Wang had never thought that the main character would be hiding here. What a scary fellow. No wonder he's that old bastard Wu Liba's grandson. That latrine pit was full of maggots and flies. Seeing that we went over to search, the fellow jumped in and hid there. He's not afraid of drowning in the feces. He's so calm at such a young age. It's really scary. Fu Wang returned close to dusk. He said to Wei Ci, "That fellow is too smelly. Let the military advisor take a look at him after washing him." Wei Ci said coldly, "He's someone who's about to die anyway. His corpse will rot eventually. There's no need to wash him." Fu Wang said, "Even so, we can't let him stink the military advisor." The ancients were still very afraid of ghosts and gods. Although Fu Wang did not believe in this, he would not make presumptuous judgments about things he did not know. No matter what, Wei Ci's little demonstration of his skills made Fu Wang feel a little more respect for him. "I'll go take a look." Wei Ci, accompanied by Fu Wang, went to see the fish that slipped through the net. Although the fish that slipped through the net was only 10 years old, his appearance was already beginning to show. He had a handsome face and deep eyes. Wei Ci looked at him as if he could see through time and see the young man who was tied up in the dungeon. To be honest, if not for their different standpoints, Wei Ci would have quite admired him. To this day, Wei Ci still remembered what the young man said before he committed suicide. The traitor Lu massacred the people of the northern borderline. How many children who were crying piteously for food lost their birth parents? How many lonely old people lost their blood relatives? Millions of people, all died under her butcher knife. I just wanted to let her die with 2 lives. Whether it was in the previous life or this life, Her Majesty was the enemy of the northern borderline. But, how could Her Majesty be the one who caused the situation in the northern borderline? Wei Ci looked at the young man's corpse that fell to the ground and muttered to himself, "It's clearly chaotic times. Her Majesty just used her own method to end the chaotic times. She used the sacrifice of a few people in exchange for the peace of the world." If the young man really succeeded, the newly established Zhang dynasty would collapse, and chaos might even reappear. At that time, Chongqing was only 5 or 6 years old. Once Her Majesty died, how could Chongqing carry the country? What would become of the originally balanced court? However, Wei Ci would not let the regrets of the previous life reappear. The child in front of him had to die. Perhaps sensing Wei Ci's murderous intent, the child's brown eyes emitted intense hatred and murderous intent, like a young lone wolf. The child's breathing was slightly stagnant. He asked Wei Ci in not very fluent Chinese, "You want to kill me?" Wei Ci nodded. He raised his right hand, and the soldier beside him handed him his sword. "Why?" the child asked again. "To cut the weeds and eliminate the roots," Wei Ci said softly. "Do I need any other reason?" To the child, Jiang Pengji had killed almost all of his relatives. He could already remember, and it was impossible for him to forget. This blood feud would not end until one of them died. The child's face was deathly pale. After a while, he felt the blood in his entire body turn cold. His body collapsed with a crash, and his blood dyed the soil beneath him. Wei Ci felt unprecedentedly relaxed as he sheathed his sword. Because of the previous example, Fu Wang was even more cautious in his work, and he completed the task Jiang Pengji gave him perfectly. "You killed someone with your own hands?" When Jiang Pengji learned of this, she did not care about the child's identity. Instead, she was concerned about the hidden reasons behind Wei Ci's actions. "That child will be a hidden danger if we keep him. It's better to get rid of him as soon as possible." Jiang Pengji frowned and said, "Just kill him. Why do you have to do it yourself?" Wei Ci said, "Mercy doesn't kill people." Jiang Pengji said, "Could it be that the child is a demon?" Wei Ci said, "What I kill is the demon in my heart." After killing the child with his own hands, Wei Ci truly felt that he could change the established future. Jiang Pengji was speechless. It was not until late autumn that Jiang Pengji completely conquered the entire northern borderline and annihilated all the nobles there. Just as she was about to heave a sigh of relief and enjoy the new year, she received a letter from Huang Song. Chapter 1024. A letter from Governor Huang? Could it be from the Mengs? Li Yun recalled the contents of the alliance between Huang Song and them. His heart tightened. Although the Mengs of Cangzhou are strong, it won't be easy for them to take advantage of Huang Song. Qiguan Rang fanned the feather fan in his hand, a cold smile on his lips. The light in his eyes seemed to be able to see through souls. Huang Song's letter has a deep meaning. Sun Wan, who was sitting beside him, felt the warmth being blown away by the cold wind. The old man furrowed his brows and secretly moved his mat to the side. He finally understood why Feng Zhen and Wei Ci were unwilling to sit beside Qiguan Rang. The northern borderline was remote and the winter was colder than the central plains. It was late autumn, and everyone wished they could carry a hot water pot in their hands, a charcoal basin in their arms, and wrap themselves in warm clothes. Who would use a feather fan to fan themselves in this season? Haha, unfortunately, the person beside him was that weirdo. Even though Sun Wan appeared calm, his brows twitched along with the rhythm of Qiguan Rang's fanning. He seemed to be enduring something. Everyone's attention was on Qiguan Rang. Only the audience sympathized with Sun Wan. Zabayako, ha ha ha, I feel cold even through the screen. Master Qiguan really didn't do it on purpose? Dusk Sunset, I don't know if it was on purpose. I only know that Master Qiguan ruined the phrase, feather fan and silk cloth. Every time I read this phrase, I always think of Master Qiguan standing in the snow and ice, smiling and fanning himself. Wei Wei Chun Feng. To the one above, that's enough. Just thinking about that image makes me stick a few more heat pads. Occasionally holding a fan and pretending to be profound is pretentious and classy. Fanning yourself in the middle of winter is considered crazy. However, even if he was crazy, Qiguan Rang was still a prince charming. The audience laughed and chatted, but the atmosphere in the main tent was not so relaxed. It was like a lump of thick ink that could not be melted, making one feel strangely suffocated. Meaning? Military advisor Qiguan, I really can't tell. What meaning can there be in this? Li Yun read Huang Song's letter repeatedly. The first half was about greeting his lord and reminiscing about old times. The second half was a brief mention of the situation on the battlefield. Jiang Pengji formed an alliance with Huang Song so that the rear would not have any worries. The latter would help her stall the Meng family in Songzhou. Qiguan Rang sneered. Commandant Li, do you really think that Governor Huang is so useless? The lord had already taken control of the northern borderline. Huang Song had many advisors under his command, but they couldn't do anything to the Meng family of Songzhou. Li Yun thought about it carefully and said, although Governor Huang controls the land of a prefecture, Haozhou has only recently escaped from the chaos of war. In terms of wealth and military strength, Haozhou cannot compete with Tsang Prefecture. Prefecture Magistrate Huang delayed the Meng family for his lord, preventing the Meng family's army from entering the northern borderline. Yun thought that was their limit. Now that Prefecture Governor Huang's army is running low on provisions, it's normal for him to seek help from the lord. Qiguan Rang was about to speak when Jiang Pengji, who was sitting at the head of the table, suddenly interrupted. When did Bogeo become a prefecture overseer? Before the war at Beijiang, Huang Song had been a county governor. The officials in the tent. My lord, you've missed the point, Wei Ci said. A few months ago, the former Haozhou magistrate passed away due to illness. His sons were incompetent and none of them could inherit his father's position. His sons jointly recommended Huang Song, and Huang Song offered 100,000 dong of provisions to the imperial court. The young emperor was very pleased and agreed to this matter, appointing Huang Song as the new Haozhou magistrate. When Huang Song was promoted, Jiang Pengji and the northern borderline were in a heated battle. How could she have the time to care about this matter? Jiang Pengji smacked her lips and a smile hung on her face. After all, which son doesn't want to inherit his father's family business? The position of Haozhou's prefecture magistrate didn't fall into the hands of his sons. Instead, it was taken by Huang Song. It would be a joke to say that his sons did it willingly. In troubled times, the one with the bigger fist had the final say. Huang Song's power spread throughout the entire Haozhou. If the position of prefecture magistrate fell into someone else's hands, Huang Song would be done for. Speaking of this, Jiang Pengji suddenly thought of a detail. Bogeo offered 100,000 dong of provisions to the imperial court as a tribute? 100,000 dong of provisions was not a small amount, but it wasn't a lot either. For an ordinary army, 100,000 dong of provisions could last them for a while, but for the imperial court, it was just a drop in the bucket. Not to mention anything else, the salaries of the imperial court officials were huge food consumers. 100,000 dong of provisions wouldn't take long. Feng Zhen laughed. I heard that the young emperor in Chenzhou is having a hard time. He owes the officials several months of salaries, and there are huge gaps in his expenses. Without the 100,000 dawn of provisions that Magistrate Huang offered as a tribute, I'm afraid the young emperor wouldn't even be able to afford his morning porridge. The royal family of Dongqing was now only an empty shell. Chenzhou is rich in resources and the people are rich. How can it not even provide for the daily expenses of the imperial court? Jiang Pengji hadn't paid attention to the news of the royal family for a long time. After the Xueqi meeting, the royal family was afraid that the feudal lords would seize their power, so they schemed against each other. Jiang Pengji left early with her people and focused on developing her own territory. After so many years, Jiang Pengji couldn't help but sigh when she heard that the royal family was in such a miserable state. The young emperor is young and ignorant. He doesn't know the hardships of the people. The Empress Dowager is the regent. She has illicit relationships with many ministers in private. She only thinks about enjoying herself all day long. How could she have the time to rectify the affairs of the imperial court? In the long run, even 10 Chenzhou wouldn't be able to withstand such extravagance, let alone 1 Chenzhou. Feng Zhen laughed. Moreover, before the fake emperor withdrew from Chenzhou, he plundered the wealth of the people. Chenzhou is no longer as prosperous as it once was. The fake emperor retreated after plundering, leaving only a dilapidated Chenzhou for the royal family. The young emperor was young and ignorant. The Empress Dowager was in the prime of her life. The mother was strong and the son was weak. The Empress Dowager was in charge of state affairs, but she didn't have any talent. She only knew how to enjoy herself and spend without restraint. It was expected that Chenzhou, which had already suffered a great loss of vitality, would end up in such a poor and weak state. Jiang Pengji tapped her fingers on the table and narrowed her eyes. Chenzhou. It's a waste of resources in the hands of the royal family. It was good enough that the royal family could gather 20,000 to 30,000 troops. Most of them were old, weak, sick, or disabled. How could they guard the huge Chenzhou? Feng Zhen said, "You're not the only one who thinks like you, my lord. It's just that no one dares to stand out." The royal family was dilapidated, but it was still the royal family. If they wanted to take Chenzhou, they would have to destroy the royal family. That meant tearing apart the last layer of Dongqing's fig leaf. The feudal lords were afraid that they would become the target of public criticism. Therefore, during the Xueqi meeting, none of the feudal lords dared to covet Chenzhou. But now, the situation was different. Jiang Pengji put the matter of Chenzhou aside and changed the topic to the core of the meeting. Just now, Han Mei asked. Wan Jing hasn't given an answer. The corner of Qiguanrang's mouth twitched. If his lord hadn't interjected and changed the topic to such a remote place, would Qiguanrang have dragged it out and not answered? Qiguanrang said, "Commander Li has underestimated Magistrate Huang's ability." Chapter 1025. Jiang Pengji smiled and agreed. That's true. Bogeo's power isn't as great as the Mengs of Cangzhou, but it's not to the extent that he can't handle it. She had fought the northern borderline for 11 months, and Huang Song and the Mengs of Cangzhou had also been in a stalemate for 11 months. Although she didn't understand the situation on the battlefield, Jiang Pengji believed that Huang Song wouldn't lose to the Mengs. Although the Mengs of Cangzhou are strong, they can't withstand a prolonged battle. Moreover, the Mengs controlled Cangzhou by force and are militaristic. They are already a spent force. Bogeo is a smart man. His strategists are difficult to deal with. It's impossible for him not to see the weakness of the Mengs of Cangzhou. In other words, Bogeo only needs to defend the city walls, block the checkpoints, and not attack. The Mengs will suffer losses just by delaying the battle. Jiang Pengji smiled faintly. Her words were full of affirmation for Huang Song. If the Mengs send troops to attack, Bogeo won't be defeated. Huang Song really couldn't beat the Mengs of Cangzhou in a head-on battle. If it was just delaying the main force of the Mengs, Huang Song should be able to handle it with ease. However, Huang Song sent an urgent letter when Jiang Pengji had just taken care of the northern borderline. Thinking of this, Jiang Pengji's eyes flashed with coldness, and the corners of her lips curled up. Qiguanrang bowed and said, "My lord is wise." A few civil officials were deep in thought. Their expressions were solemn. The generals followed the crowd and lowered their heads, pretending to be thinking. If one looked closely at their eyes, they would find that they were slightly confused. They obviously didn't understand. Towards this, the generals expressed their bitterness in their hearts. There was a group of highly intelligent people in the tent. As ordinary people, they were very stressed. Not only did the generals express that they didn't understand, but the audience in the streaming room also urgently called for the big shots. They urgently needed a big shot who was the representative of the language class for this segment that required brains. Otherwise, it would be like listening to a book from heaven. After many calls, a big shot finally appeared. Their bullet screens were also manually blocked by the idle people. Lao Ciji Lianming. I'm glad I didn't miss today's streaming. Seeing Huang Song's letter, I have a feeling that it's finally happening. Thinking back to the past, the host and Huang Song were still a bunch of scoundrels who went to the brothel to drink wine together. They were good brothers, but now they were plotting against each other. Qiguan Rang had said that Huang Song's letter had a hidden meaning. I was stunned for a long time before I understood what he meant. This letter wasn't a conspiracy, but it was an open and above-board plot. The target of the plot was the host. Why did he say that? Judging from the conversation of the streamer and the others, Huang Song could not defeat the Meng family. But the Meng family could not do anything to Huang Song either. Huang Song did not need help at all. However, Huang Song still wrote a letter? Why? Because he couldn't let the host have any room for further development. Gue Kai Guo Fengxiu, we saw it too. The streamer has just finished fighting in Beijiang. Although she won all the way, it wasn't easy. For this battle, the host had almost exhausted all of her family's assets. After fighting for almost 11 months, she could be said to have turned out in full force. There was a saying in Sun Tzu's Art of War that was very true. In war, victory was the most important, not the most important. What he meant was that the most important thing in a war was to win it quickly and not to prolong it. The streamer has just taken over the northern borderline, and the people's hearts are still unsettled. The subsequent investment in governance is an astronomical figure, and the expenditure is no less than the investment in war. If she didn't handle it well, the Beijiang might rebound. Under such circumstances, it was really inappropriate for the host to continue fighting. Huang Song's request for help was actually throwing the enemy, who had not consumed much of their troops, to the host. If the war with the Meng family started, guess how long it would last? This was an open and above-board way to force the host to be militaristic. In Yuejia Zhuge Qinma. I really underestimated Huang Song in the past. This guy doesn't make any moves, but once he does, he makes people fall. This was an open and above-board plot. The host had dug a hole in front of her. She had to jump in even if she didn't want to. No matter what Huang Song's plan was, it was an indisputable fact that he helped the host to contain the Meng family's troops, so that the Meng family could not sneak attack the host from behind. Now that Huang Song had sent a letter asking for help, the host had no reason to refuse to send troops. No matter who won or lost, Huang Song could advance or retreat freely. Dense bullet screens floated in front of the eyes. Many of the audience saw the analysis of the big shots and felt a chill. Xiong Ben Papa gets dressed. This conspiracy theory is really scary. Did Huang Song really plot against the host? Yan Hua Ji Yuan, scratching my head. If I transmigrated, I feel that I wouldn't survive more than 3 episodes. Even Huang Song is so shrewd. How can transmigrators survive? When I saw Huang Song's letter, my first reaction was to send troops to suppress the Meng family. I didn't expect there to be so many tricks behind it. Host, why don't you send troops? Mo Lonji. It's impossible not to send troops. If you don't send troops, the host is really finished. Huang Song and Jiang Pengji formed an alliance. Chapter 1026. Lang Jun is back. Zhu Qingning was embroidering in the hall. Hearing the servant's greeting, she quickly stood up to welcome him. Before she could take 2 steps, her Lang Jun had already stepped forward and stopped her. Why are you so careful? Nye Sun's lips curled up slightly. His bright smile made the cinnabar between his eyebrows as red as blood. He said, Wunyang has 2 bodies now. If anything goes wrong, won't you kill me? Zhu Qingning blushed and said in annoyance, Oh, I was wondering why you treat me so well. It turns out that it's because of my belly. Nye Sun did not panic in the face of this fatal question. Instead, he helped Zhu Qingning back to the main hall. Wunyang's words hurt. It's obvious that you love me so much that you value the child in your belly. You are all my treasures. I feel bad if I mistreat any one of you. Nye Sun helped Zhu Qingning to sit down. It's cold now. Remember not to wear so thin clothes. The room is very warm. You won't catch a cold, Zhu Qingning said. Now that the month is getting heavier, the clothes that were made a while ago are also tight. Zhu Qingning used her right hand to touch her slightly protruding belly. Her originally slim waist was slightly plump because of pregnancy. Although she lost her graceful figure, it added a bit of the unique charm of a mature woman. Ask someone to make a few more clothes. Not to mention 1 round, I can even put on 30 or 50 rounds. Before Nyesun could finish his words, his ear was already pinched by a slim and soft hand. Zhu Qingning gritted her teeth beside his ear. 30 or 50 rounds. Not to mention 30 or 50 rounds, even if it's only 3 or 5 rounds, I'm afraid that you'll already have other beauties by your side. Nyesun did not dare to struggle. He could only lean toward her according to her strength. His other hand held the mat to avoid really crushing her. Woonyang, who's gossiping in your ear? Do I look like that kind of person? Nyesun tried his best to save his ear. Zhu Qingning pursed her lips and said with different intentions, I don't even have a place to walk. Who can gossip in my ear? But my body is getting heavier and sometimes it's inconvenient. I really need to arrange someone to serve you early. Nyesun's parents were not around. Zhu Qingning did not have a mother-in-law to pressure her. Logically speaking, their married life should be very happy. As a matter of fact, they were indeed happy at the beginning, and their love for each other was joyous. As she got pregnant, her body became heavier and heavier, and she liked to overthink. Nyesun frowned and joked. Madam is not such a virtuous person. Your husband still remembers what you said before we got married. If other women took a fancy to your clothes, jewelry, and rouge, you would give them to them generously as long as you had a good relationship with them. But if someone takes a liking to your husband, don't even talk about moving. Even if you think about it for a moment, you have to teach that woman a lesson. Zhu Qingning's pretty face turned cold, and she snorted unhappily. You think I'm willing? Isn't it all because of that lord of yours? Why did she send you so many women for no reason? Zhu Qingning was pregnant, so it was easy for her to overthink. Looking at the young women in the residence, he felt as if something was stuck in his heart, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. She also knew that her husband was a man of integrity and would not touch dirty women, but he could not withstand accidents. His wife was pregnant and couldn't serve him. What if he couldn't control himself and secretly ate her? Rather than letting her husband cheat outside and touch unknown women, it was better to pick a woman he knew through and through. No matter which possibility it was, Zhu Qingning was not happy, and her emotions were on the verge of exploding. She was the youngest daughter that her father doted on the most, the pearl in his hands. Why should she push her husband to another woman? She couldn't do it. Nyesun frowned. Although he had a clever mind, he was a man after all, and his thoughts were not on the same channel as a woman's. How did he know that his wife had been troubled these days because of the maids in the residence? After all, it's the Lord's good intentions, so it's not good to refuse. Leave them in the residence to look at, and if they don't feel good, we can just sell them. Nyesun had never looked at the maids in the residence seriously. To him, the maids were just maids that served the madam. If these maids made the madam unhappy, they would naturally be sold. Nyesun said with a smile, Madam used to be so decisive, why are you so indecisive now? Zhu Qingning let out a long sigh and said dejectedly, I don't know either. These days, I can't help but think too much, and I can't control myself. Nyesun suggested, why don't you write a letter for me and ask my mother-in-law to come over and accompany you for a while? If there was a mother-in-law to enlighten her, the madam would not think too much and scare herself. Zhu Qingning shook her head. That's not appropriate. Mother is already old, and it's not good for her to travel. Nyesun said, in that case, why don't I spend more time at home? Zhu Qingning smiled and curved her eyebrows. The couple snuggled and said a lot of words of love, and the atmosphere around them was filled with a romantic atmosphere. By the way, Qingyin. Zhu Qingning suddenly thought of something. Nyesun answered vaguely. This morning, the housekeeper reported that he found a maid. This maid claimed to be my husband's wet nurse. Zhu Qingning knew that her husband had been looking for his background. He found it in Dongqing from Zhongzhou, but the clues were cut off. Even after joining Huang Song, Nyesun did not give up on the journey to find his roots. My wet nurse. Over the years, Nyesun had seen too many liars who wanted to pass off fake eyes as genuine, so he was very suspicious of the identity of this wet nurse. Zhu Qingning said. Does Lang Jun want to see her? Nie Sun closed his eyes slightly, and the bright red cinnabar between his eyebrows became brighter. He said, then let's meet. The couple had dinner together. Nie Sun coaxed Zhu Qingning to sleep, and then left to see the so-called wet nurse. You said, you are my wet nurse? Nie Sun looked coldly at the old woman who was kneeling in the hall. The old woman had been waiting for a day in fear. When she heard Nie Sun's voice, which was clear and pleasant, she could not help but look up. When she saw it, she suddenly froze on the spot, and her lips moved. Really like, the old woman murmured as if she was recalling something. Seeing her performance, Nie Sun suddenly became a little interested, and asked with a smile, like what? The old woman said with tears in her eyes, Second Lang Jun and Madame Jeanne are too similar. Madame Jeanne? Nie Sun frowned, feeling that there might be a different harvest this time. Who is the Madame Jeanne you are talking about? The old woman said, Madame Jeanne is Second Lang Jun's biological mother. Nie Sun did not believe her. There were many people who looked alike in the world. Apart from that, there were many loopholes in some places. The old woman said that he was the child of Madame Jeanne, and claimed to be his wet nurse. From this, it could be seen that Madame Jeanne's husband's family should be well off. Since they were well off, how could a newborn boy be abducted and sold, and end up in Zhongzhou? Nie Sun asked, do you have any evidence for what you said? The old woman said, I remember clearly that Second Lang Jun was born with cinnabar between his eyebrows. When he was born he was plump and beautiful. Nie Sun was speechless. Chapter 10:27. The old woman saw Nie Sun's unhappy expression and knew that she had said something wrong, so she quickly tried to remedy it. I still remember one thing, she said hurriedly. There was a red mole on the inside of your right thigh. After the old woman said this, Nie Sun's expression changed slightly. Other than his servants and his wife, no one else knew about his unique features, not to mention his inner thighs. Nie Sun had a feeling that maybe he could find the answer to the mystery that had puzzled him for many years from the old woman. The old woman cried, Second Lang Jun, I really didn't lie to you. Every word is true. Nie Sun suppressed his emotions. Other than that? The old woman choked. She thought she had said something wrong, so she said in a trembling voice, Other than that, you look like Madame Jeanne. When I saw you just now, I thought I saw the newly married Madame Jeanne. What a beautiful person. Unfortunately, a beautiful woman has a short life. Nie Sun didn't know what expression to show. He knew that he was very beautiful, and he could outshine all the other beauties with just a little makeup, but he didn't like people talking about his appearance. His appearance was not as pure and unparalleled as Wei Si's. Instead, he had an oppressive beauty. Because of his outstanding appearance, Nie Sun was often bullied as a girl by the Nie family when he was a child. Nie Sun still remembered the embarrassment and humiliation of being surrounded by people against the wall and being forced to take off his pants to prove that he was a man. Are you serious? The old woman said. Of course. Madame Jeanne was very beautiful. It's hard to forget her. You said that a beautiful woman has a short life. Did she die early? Nie Sun didn't dare to ask for specific information. He always felt flustered, so he only dared to ask for some trivial information. The old woman shook her head like a rattle drum. She said, Madame Jeanne is alive and well now. Nie Sun heard this and felt a little bad. His parents' family was not bad. Why did they abandon him? Nie Sun took a deep breath. Tell me everything you know. The old woman nodded, but hesitated before she spoke. Second Lang Jun, if I tell you, can you give me some money and food? My family's life is difficult. If it weren't for the fact that they were too poor, the old woman wouldn't have come to Nie Sun to try her luck. She wasn't sure if Nie Sun was the baby boy from back then. After all, she was the one who had buried the baby boy into the ground. Who knew that he was still alive? When she mentioned the red mole on her thigh, the man's expression changed drastically. It seemed like they were the same person. Nie Sun frowned deeply and waved his hand to signal his servant to bring a plate of silver to the old woman. There were 20 ingots. The old woman's hands trembled as she stroked the silver. She was so happy that she didn't hesitate to speak. Second Lang Jun, what do you want to know? I will tell you everything I can. The old woman suppressed her excitement, and the wrinkles on her face squeezed together with a smile. Nie Sun asked, Who are my parents? Why did they abandon me? The old woman was stunned for a moment. She sighed and said, Second Lang Jun, you were not abandoned. Nyesun was startled. Not abandoned? The old woman nagged. This old servant was Madame Jeanne's dowry maid, and later married a manservant. Madame Lai gave birth to eldest Lang Jun, but she couldn't win back the master's heart. Instead, she was suppressed by the master's favorite concubine. Later, Madame Jeanne and the concubine got pregnant at the same time. Even so, the master still didn't look at Madame Jeanne. Madame Lai risked a difficult labor and gave birth to you for a day and a night. That concubine also gave birth to a son. The master favored the concubine and neglected the wife. He couldn't bear that the concubine's son was treated as a concubine's son, so he simply swapped you too. Nyesun felt like he was listening to a heavenly book. He was so angry that he laughed. Which family has such a strange upbringing? Mixing the legal son and the concubine, and pretending to be the legal son? When Nyesun heard the truth, he began to doubt whether his ears were playing tricks on him. How could there be such a ridiculous thing? The old woman saw that Nyesun was angry, and she hurriedly said, This is absolutely true, but according to the rumor, it seems that Madame Lai was not content with her marriage, and secretly had an affair with a servant and gave birth to you. Outsiders said so, but this old servant dares to curse that Madame Lai is innocent and has never done anything wrong to the master. It must be the master's concubine who made it up and slandered Madame Jeanne's innocence. Nyesun quickly calmed down, and his expression didn't change. I have a question. The old woman didn't know that danger was coming. Instead, she wore a flattering smile. Second Lang Jun, please ask. Nyesun said, You should be the concubine's servant, right? The old woman was so scared that her face turned ashen, and her legs were trembling. This, Nyesun said indifferently. Mixing the legal son and the concubine's son is such a big thing. There should be very few people who know about it. Not only do you know about it, but you even claim to be my wet nurse. It can be seen that you must have taken care of me in the past, so you know that I have a red mole on my leg. In that case, I have another question. How did I leave the mansion and end up being sold? The old woman opened her eyes wide in astonishment. She was so scared that she retreated on her knees. She didn't even dare to look at the plate of silver. Second Lang Jun, Nyesun got up from the table, raised his hand, and pulled out the sword at his waist. The tip of the sword was against the old woman's throat. Tell me the truth. The old woman cried and said, Every word I said is true. The concubine saw that you looked too much like Lady Chong. She was afraid that you would arouse Lady Chong's suspicion during the elders' meeting, so she asked me to send you out of the mansion. She even ordered me to bury you. Hearing the word bury, Nyesun was basically sure that the old woman was telling the truth. Nyesun followed the clues to Dongqing and asked many people. The first person who found Nyesun was a farmer's wife. She accidentally heard crying in the ground, so she dug out the dying Nyesun from the soil. The farmer's wife didn't take care of him. Instead, she sold him to a human trafficker. Because Nyesun was good-looking, he was more expensive than a normal baby boy. After a few twists and turns, Nyesun ended up in Zhongzhou. Coincidentally, he was adopted by a side branch of the Nye family. Nyesun asked the old woman in a low voice. Tell me, who are my birth parents? Although Nyesun came to find his birth parents, he didn't have much feelings for them. He just wanted to find his roots. If his birth parents lost him because they had no other choice, Nyesun could consider helping them. If his birth parents abandoned him on purpose, he would make them regret it. Nyesun didn't want to acknowledge anything, not to mention giving birth. In his opinion, the essence of giving birth was just one sentence. When a man and a woman get together, they have children. The mother was pregnant for 10 months, and the father was just a night of pleasure. They had the right to give birth to him, but they didn't have the right to take his life. The old woman looked at Nyesun's gloomy face, and her heart couldn't help but tremble. She said with a trembling voice, Second Longjuan's birth father is the leader of the Meng family in Songzhou. His surname is Meng, and his name is Zhan. His birth mother is the daughter of a concubine from the Gu family in Langjia. Her name is Gu Zhen. She has now remarried to Lu Shi, the second legitimate son of the Lu family in Hejian. I heard that Lu Shi is quite famous now. Second Lang Jun. I'm telling the truth. Nyesun was speechless. Say it again. I didn't hear it clearly. The old woman closed her eyes and looked like she was facing death calmly. She repeated it intermittently. Nyesun was so shocked that he took a few steps back. The sword in his hand fell to the ground. If my background is exposed, it's not a big deal. I'm just afraid that the Lord will be suspicious. After all, Meng Zhan's first wife is now Lu Shi's second wife, Lu Shi's stepmother and aunt. With this relationship, even if I tell others that I don't recognize it, they might not think so. People always thought that blood ties could not be broken. Even if the bones were broken, the tendons were still connected. From this, it could be concluded that Nyesun was Gu Zhan's son. He would definitely side with the Lu family. It was obviously a robber's theory, but countless stupid people regarded it as a standard. Zhu Qingning exclaimed softly. After a while she said, Lang Jun is loyal to the Lord. He's not the kind of person who changes his mind. I can't stop the Lord from thinking too much. Zhu Qingning was unconvinced. How can it be like this? Isn't Feng Bijie's second brother also working under Lu Shi? Feng Ju was Huang Song's most trusted official in Haozhou. Nyesun said, Huaijie and the Lord have been close friends since they were young. Their relationship is extraordinary. How can it be the same? Zhu Qingning's face turned pale. She muttered, Lang Jun has already dealt with the wet nurse. No one should know about this. Nyesun smiled bitterly. It's hard to say. Zhu Qingning looked at her husband in confusion. Nyesun coughed softly and said in a low voice, I'm afraid that I've offended Lu Shi badly. Outsiders say that he's open-minded and carefree. But from my point of view, no matter how petty he is, he's still vengeful. How did you offend him? Nyesun said, I came up with a plan for the Lord. Zhu Qingning blinked and asked, And then? Nyesun coughed softly again. Chapter 1029. Zhu Qingning immediately figured out the crux of the matter. It was a blatant plot. Knowing that there was a trap in front of him, Lu Shi had to jump into it. Nyesun said, Lu Shi conquered the entire northern borderline. I thought it would take 2 to 3 years, but I didn't expect him to defeat the northern borderline in just 11 months. I heard a lot of news from the Lord. I have to admit that Lu Shi is definitely a big threat to the Lord. She can only feel at ease if she gets rid of him as soon as possible. If we don't do anything and let her stabilize the northern borderline and train a large number of cavalrymen, I'm afraid she can sweep Dongqing. Zhu Qingning was speechless. Hearing the name Lu Shi, the image of a youth in cotton clothes and wooden clogs hiding among the branches full of flowers appeared in his mind. He looked lazy and unrestrained. Even today, that scene was still as vivid as before. Nyesun didn't know what Zhu Qingning was thinking. He sighed and said, I don't want to plot against Lu Shi. Lu Shi's power is in a delicate position. Even if the Lord doesn't provoke her, she won't let you go. Although she's a woman, her ambition isn't as simple as just one state and one county. If she wants to continue expanding her power, she can't avoid the Lord. Sooner or later, the two of them will fight. Jiang Pengji had already conquered the entire northern borderline. In addition to the 2 states and 1 county in Dongqing, her territory was comparable to a country. The Lord, Huang Song, only had Haozhou. No matter what, he was no match for Jiang Pengji. Therefore, Nyesun had to plan for Huang Song and close the gap between them as much as possible. A glimmer of calculation flashed in his eyes. Nyesun's original intention was to annex Qinzhou and control half of Cangzhou. The other half of Cangzhou would be given to Jiang Pengji. If they could stabilize 2 states and half of Cangzhou, Huang Song and Lu Shi would have the capital to compete. However, Nyesun looked down at his wife, whose breathing was gradually stabilizing. A faint smile appeared on his lips. He didn't acknowledge Meng Zhan's kindness, but Meng Zhan owed him. He had to get it back no matter what. Why not use the whole of Cangzhou as compensation? Nyesun carried Zhu Qingning and carried him back to the bedroom. Outside, there was a thunderstorm, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. Compared to Nyesun's blissful life with his wife, his brother Meng Hang was not so lucky. Meng Hang was wearing a gray scholar's robe. His sleeves and back were mottled with whip marks. Blood was flowing from his open flesh. The thunderstorm washed the blood from his wounds to the ground. Even in such a mess, he still tried to crawl to Meng Zhan, who was standing in the corridor. Father, I beg you, don't make the same mistake again. Meng Zhan held a long whip in his hand. There were some barbs on the whip, and there were some blood beads on the barbs. Lang Jun is awake. Meng Heng's wife had been watching over him for 3 days and 3 nights. Seeing him wake up, she was so happy that she almost cried. Meng Heng's throat was dry. He only managed to say one word before he felt like a knife was cutting his throat. Water. His wife brought him water and helped him swallow. My eye. Meng Heng weakly raised his hand and touched his left eye. He only felt a thick white cloth. Your eye is fine. Luckily, only your eyelid was hurt. The doctor said that if the knife had cut deeper, your eyeball would have been ruined. Meng Heng's wife sighed and quickly cleaned up the dishes. Meng Heng sat on the couch, his right eye lifeless. After a while, his wife brought him a bowl of porridge. Meng Heng glanced at her wrist. The golden bracelet with 2 phoenixes holding beads was gone. Where's your bracelet? His wife's anger subsided when she saw that he was still so careful even though he had just recovered from a serious illness. I pawned it. Pawned it? If I didn't, where would I get the money to buy medicine and hire a doctor? His wife sighed and fed him the porridge. Ever since you were disfigured and almost went blind, the Meng clan didn't even send a single person. They just threw you home to fend for yourself. Meng Heng's hands trembled. His right eye shone and was filled with water vapor. After a while he said, It's been hard for you to be with me. His wife said, We're one family. Don't say that. Drink it. Don't ask for a beating in front of your father anymore. Meng Heng lowered his head and drank the porridge. His eyes swept over his wife's bulging belly. His wife had been pregnant for 5 months. The children in her belly needed nourishment, but he was disappointing and let them suffer. His wife took a deep breath and resisted the urge to cry. She lowered her head and heard Meng Heng's calm voice. Zhaodi, how much money do we have left? His wife whispered. Only 30 taels left. 30 taels? Meng Heng mumbled. That's barely enough. What are you doing? Chapter 10:30. His wife put down the bowl helplessly and murmured blankly. Leave. Meng Heng heaved a long sigh and wrapped his wife's hands in his big palms. His hands were warm and dry, which made his wife feel more at ease. Songzhou is not a place to stay for long. I tried to persuade my father to admit defeat so that the people of Songzhou would be spared from the war. But Meng Heng's mouth was slightly bitter. My father no longer cares about the people. Songzhou will inevitably be affected by the war. Songzhou might not be afraid of Huang Song alone. But with cousin Shi, Songzhou has no chance of winning. His wife pressed her lips tightly, her eyes filled with a sense of loss about the future. Cousin Shi? I often hear you mention her. Since you are relatives, why can't you talk about it calmly? Meng Heng smiled bitterly. He stroked his wife's hair with one hand and sighed faintly. It's not that simple, Zhaodi. Even if we are blood-related, this relationship is fragile in front of the world, let alone a cousin. Meng Heng said, My father's stubbornness will inevitably bring disaster to the people of Songzhou. If the Meng family in Songzhou still had the legacy of their ancestors, why would Meng Heng persuade his father to admit defeat? The Meng family had lost the people's support and would not last long. His wife turned around and took out her dowry. The bottom layer of the dowry hid the family's savings. But there are only 30 taels of silver. It's chaotic outside. Where can we go? Meng Heng looked at the silver pieces and then at his wife's careful posture. His chest could not help but twitch and ache. He suppressed his emotions and said in a low voice, I'll spend 15 taels to nourish your body and protect your pregnancy. The remaining 15 taels to buy a carriage, dry food, and a water bag. Let's go to Hanchong Pass. Out of Hanchong Pass, we'll go straight to Heda County at the border of Haozhou and Songzhou. We'll stay there for the time being. His wife's eyes widened and her hands holding the dowry trembled. Lang Jun, isn't there a war there? It's because there is a war there that we have to go there. We don't have much savings. We won't be able to make it to Hejin County, let alone Wanzhou and Chongzhou, Meng Heng said. Huang Song and cousin Shi formed an alliance and helped her delay the Meng's troops. Now that the war in Beijiang had ended, Huang Song might not be able to sit still. He would definitely write to cousin Shi for help. We don't have to go far. We just need to wait in Heda County. His wife was at a loss, but she was used to being docile and obedient. She would do whatever Meng Heng said. Looking at his wife's slightly protruding belly, Meng Heng had a look of realization. If it wasn't for the fact that Songzhou had no one to entrust him to, he wouldn't have brought his wife through the war zone. The risk was simply too great. Although Meng Heng was Meng Zhan's only son, his position in the Mengs was very awkward. He was even less favored than the son of a concubine. In the early years, the elders of the Meng family had taken good care of him. As time went by, Meng Zhan's pressure on him became heavier and heavier. Seeing that, the elders of the Mengs were planning to change to another branch. In theory, Meng Heng's wife should be the matriarch of the Mengs. However, Meng Zhan was too lazy to arrange a marriage for him. So Meng Heng didn't get married until he was 23. It was because the elders of the Mengs couldn't stand it anymore and took the initiative to arrange it for him. He did get married, but his wife's background was very subtle. She was the daughter of a branch of a declining aristocratic family. It was a nice way to put it. To put it bluntly, his wife was just the daughter of a butcher. The aristocratic families were also divided into different classes. The prominent aristocratic families could control the situation. The declining aristocratic families were even worse than the common people. Except for a famous ancestor, they had almost nothing. Meng Heng's wife was from a branch of a declining aristocratic family. To make a living, her grandfather gave up his pride and became a butcher. If it weren't for the genealogy, his wife's family would be no different from the common people. Meng Heng didn't look down on his wife's background, but he couldn't deny that this marriage was indeed a humiliation to him by the Mengs. Meng Heng had endured all of this. Now that he looked back, he felt extremely guilty. No matter what happened in the past, Zhao Di was already his wife. He had the responsibility and obligation to make her live a good life. But what happened? Fortunately, it wasn't too late to wake up. Meng Zhan wasn't a good father, but he couldn't be an irresponsible husband and father. The couple lived in a remote place. There wasn't much in the house, so it wasn't hard to put them away. Meng Heng drove his wife out of Meng County, Song Prefecture. Meng Zhan didn't know the news until they reached the border of Meng County. The subordinate waited in fear, afraid of Meng Zhan's thunderous anger. You said he left Meng County with that lowly woman and went to Hanchong Pass? Meng Zhan asked with a cold smile. The subordinate was so anxious that he was sweating. He said anxiously, "Yes. Do you need me to send someone to get Elder Lang Jun back?" Meng Zhan looked at the subordinate coldly. His eyes were full of warning. "Since when do you have the right to make decisions for me?" Meng Zhan snorted and said heartlessly, "Since he doesn't recognize me as his father, I will pretend that I never had a son. Send someone to tell the elders to open the ancestral hall and remove his name." The subordinate opened his eyes wide in shock. No matter what, Meng Heng was still a Zongzi. Since ancient times, there was no reason to remove the name of a Zongzi from the genealogy. Meng Zhan knew what he was thinking and said with a cold smile, "Zongzi? Look at his wife, a butcher who can't even be seen in public. How can a woman like her be the matriarch of the Mengs? Since he has abandoned the Mengs, then let it be. All right, send someone to chase after him. Also, bring a message for me. If he leaves the Mengs, don't come back. He is not a Zongzi of the Mengs, and he has no right to use the surname Meng. Even his surname has been removed." The subordinate said, "Yes." For safety reasons, Meng Heng tried to take the main road. To take care of his wife, the carriage traveled slowly. It was only 3 days away from Hanchong Pass. The pursuers from the Mengs caught up with Meng Heng and brought a message from Meng Zhan. Meng Heng listened to the message with a pale face. His lips were colorless. His left eyelid, which should have healed, was hurting. The scene in front of him flickered and he almost lost his balance. "Elder Lang Jun, why don't you go back and apologize to the patriarch? There is no hatred between father and son." The subordinate looked at Meng Heng's pale face and felt sorry for him. Meng Heng's talent was second to none among his peers. If any family had such a good descendant, they would have been so happy. But his patriarch was a weirdo. Meng Zhan didn't feel proud or honored. Instead, he felt ashamed of Meng Heng. He scolded him every few days and tried to suppress him. They were not father and son. They were enemies. There is no hatred between father and son. But what if they are not father and son? Meng Heng smiled bitterly and held back the hot tears that were welling up in his eyes. He said gloomily, "Allow me to kowtow to him again. If there's a chance, I'll definitely repay him for raising me for over 20 years. Meng Heng knelt down in the direction of Meng County in Songzhou and kowtowed 3 times. His forehead was blue and red. The subordinate looked at Meng Heng, who staggered to get up and sighed. "Elder Lang Jun, the war is still going on. For safety's sake, you should change your route." Chapter 1031. Pft. Cough cough cough. Who are you talking about? Who's here? Huang Song was enjoying his tea. When he heard his subordinate's message, he almost choked on the tea. The subordinate could only bite the bullet and repeat it. Early this morning, Yuan Chong, the lieutenant under Huang Song's command, was patrolling. They found a couple whose whereabouts were suspicious, so they simply arrested them for questioning. Among them, the man had a scholarly temperament. Although he was wearing shabby linen clothes, he was neither servile nor overbearing when he asked questions. Obviously, he was not an ordinary person. Once she asked, she was shocked. The couple was from Meng County, Song Prefecture. Yuan Chong thought he was a spy, but upon further investigation, he realized that the man was actually the eldest son of the Meng family, Meng Heng. However, Meng Heng smiled bitterly at Yuan Chong's suspicious gaze. That was in the past. Now, I'm just a commoner without a surname. Meng Heng was expelled from the Meng family, and his family name was removed. Hearing this, Yuan Chong pulled out his knife and placed it on Meng Heng's neck. He said mockingly, "Old Meng's son, aren't you afraid of death?" However, Meng Heng said, "My mother is the stepmother of Lu Shi, the governor of Lu province. Lu Shi and I are cousins. Do you really dare to behead me?" This relationship was Meng Heng's final trump card. He was also certain that Yuan Chong would not dare to kill him. Although Huang Song and Jiang Pengji each had their own plans, they had not completely fallen out with each other yet. Huang Song did not dare to kill Jiang Pengji's cousin, even if his identity had not been verified. After coughing enough, Huang Song wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. "Invite him over." After the subordinate left, Cheng Jing, who was handling official business, put down the things in his hands and asked, "That person was Meng Heng?" Huang Song asked, "Yumo knows him?" Cheng Jing said calmly, "Meng Heng and Jing were assessed in the same year. Originally, he was the best contender for the top 3, but Meng Heng was influenced by his younger brother, Meng Liang. In the end, the examiner gave him a very low evaluation, which resulted in Meng Heng not even making it into the top 100. When Feng Ju heard the commotion, he also came over to intervene. "Meng Heng is my brother's classmate. They have a good relationship," Feng Ju said with a smile. "If the person is really Meng Heng, Ju will recognize him." In fact, both Feng Ju and Cheng Jing felt that the person who came was really Meng Heng. This was a sensitive time. Who would dare to pretend to be a disciple of the Meng family in Huang Song's territory? Was he not afraid of death? The 3 of them didn't notice that when Sun heard the news, his hand froze and he almost dropped his brush. Fortunately, no one was paying attention to him. They are all gifts from others. It's not good to use them. In this way, won't you owe everyone a favor? His wife resisted and forced herself to move her eyes away. "I owe cousin Shi. I'll repay you in the future." Meng Heng smiled as he picked up a golden bracelet made of twin phoenix silk and put it on his wife's wrist. The golden color was far better than the one that had been pawned, and it was heavier. Because of the bracelet, his wife's wrist seemed even more slender and weak. "In the future, your husband will earn more for you. I will never let you and our child suffer any losses." If it were not for Jiang Pengji, Huang Song would not have treated him so well. Therefore, Meng Heng was very clear about whom he owed a favor. His wife smiled. "I believe you." It was a great honor for the butcher's daughter to marry the eldest son of the Mengs, but it was a great humiliation for Meng Heng. Meng Heng felt that he had treated her unfairly, but she felt that she had wronged him. No matter what, they were husband and wife. They would support each other for the rest of their lives. At that moment, the maidservant reported from outside the paper door. Meng Heng and his wife were stunned. "This Sun. Does my husband know you?" His wife was surprised. They had just settled down here, and someone had brought his wife to visit. Meng Hang was also puzzled, but he had also asked around. Nie Sun was a strategist that Huang Song relied heavily on. He could not be offended easily. I don't know him. He's Nie Sun's wife. Madam, please entertain him. Then he said to the maidservant, please wait in the hall, Mr. Nie. I'll go over now. Did Nie Sun visit on Huang Song's orders? With such doubts, Meng Hang met Nie Sun for the first time. The two looked at each other. They both felt a strange emotion rise from the bottom of their hearts. Nie Sun did not observe Meng Hang carefully through the screen. Now that they were face to face, he realized that Meng Hang did not have any similarities with him. In his opinion, Nie Sun's visit was definitely instructed by Huang Song, but he didn't know what the purpose was. After talking for more than an hour, the sky outside gradually darkened. Nie Sun took his leave regretfully, and Meng Hang stood up to send him off. After sending him off, Meng Hang still had no idea why Nie Sun was there. Don't look at how they talked, but if you really analyze the content of the conversation, you would find that they only talked about the interesting things of their youth and didn't touch on any political affairs. You really don't know Mr. Nie? Meng Hang returned to his room in a daze. His wife's puzzled question drifted into his ears. I just feel that he looks familiar, but after thinking about it, I really haven't seen him before. Meng Hang came back to his senses and said, I heard that Nie Sun is from Bianzhou in Zhongzhou. Before he became an official in Huang Song, he never left his homeland. How did I get to know him? Why do you ask? Meng Hang's wife pointed at the pile of gifts on the table and sighed. This Madame Nie is truly a considerate and gentle person. Look at the gifts she gave. Every single one of them is delivered to the heart. Governor Huang's gift of silk satin and gold and silver jewelry is good, but this madam gave a lot of good fertility medicine and nourishing food. These materials are delicate and soft. Although they haven't been dyed, they're best for women and babies. Huang Song's gifts were expensive, but many of the materials weren't suitable for pregnant women. They looked good but weren't practical. Nie Sun and his wife's gifts were heartfelt. It was as if everything had been considered. Not only were there gentle and nourishing herbs, food, and cloth, but there was also a box of silver fragments. Huang Song gave him gold, which he couldn't spend. However, the box of silver fragments Nie Sun and his wife gave him immediately came in handy. The gifts weren't very expensive, but the thought was enough. Meng Hang frowned and raised his hand to touch the items. After thinking about it, Meng Hang's brows relaxed. Just now, Nie Sun mentioned that his wife is also pregnant. Because Madame Nie was also pregnant, it was more convenient to prepare the things a pregnant woman needed. No matter how he thought about it, this was the only reason that made sense. Meng Hang glanced at his wife. When he saw that she was smiling and didn't look like she was wronged, his impression of Nie Sun and his wife improved. He heard that Nie Sun's wife was the youngest legitimate daughter of Master Yuan Jing. She had an extraordinary background and a good upbringing. This kind of noble lady was prideful to the core and disdained to associate with lowly people. Because his wife was the daughter of a butcher, no one taught her how to deal with those difficult women when she was still a virgin. After his wife married him, she was often ostracized by the other noble ladies of the Meng family, both openly and secretly. Meng Hang knew this, but he couldn't help her. Every time he saw his wife's sad expression, Meng Hang felt bad. He could only try his best to help her. Nie Sun and his wife came to visit. They couldn't just take care of Nie Sun and leave Nie Sun's wife to the side, right? In the end, the mistress still had to entertain them. From the looks of it, Nie Sun's wife didn't have the bad temper of a noble lady and was very gentle. His wife said, "No wonder, Madame Nie looks childish, but she's very good at raising children." Meng Hang asked casually, "What's Madame Nie's personality like?" His wife said, "I was a little worried that I would neglect her, but after getting to know her, that Madame's personality is really great." She had interacted with many noble ladies, but they couldn't compare to Madame Nie. Not to mention anything else, just her temperament made people unable to help but get close to her. However, there was one thing that was very strange. Madame Nie was very respectful to her. But then again, she was only the daughter of a butcher. What did she have that was worthy of a madam from a noble family treating her with respect? That was why his wife asked Meng Hang if he was close friends with Nie Sun. The husband and wife looked at each other, puzzled. It was late at night. Meng Heng and his wife were tired, so they washed up and went to bed. Meng Heng closed his eyes, but he couldn't fall asleep. Nie Soon's face kept swaying in front of him. Meng Heng tossed and turned, startling his wife who was beside him. Lang Jun. His wife was confused. Meng Heng's mind flashed, and he suddenly remembered another face. I remember, Mother. Meng Heng blurted out. His wife was surprised. Mother? What does this have to do with mother-in-law? Nie Soon, he looks a little similar to Mother when she was young. I was wondering why I thought he looked familiar, his wife exclaimed. Mr. Nie looks like mother-in-law when she was young? Meng Heng said, I was just thinking about who Nie Soon looks like, and I suddenly remembered when I was young. Nie Soon does look a little similar to Mother. The Meng and Madame Lu were enemies, so Meng Heng was also restrained. Even though he got married, he couldn't bring his wife to meet his birth mother. Chapter 1033. No wonder, when I see Nie Soon, I always feel close. With his doubts cleared, Meng Heng felt much better. Only then did the late drowsiness come over him. Gu Zhan did not tell Meng Heng that the second son of the first wife had been swapped, so when Meng Heng found that Nie Soon looked like Gu Zhan and saw the bright red cinnabar mole between his eyebrows, he did not think much of it. Instead, he sighed at how wonderful fate was. He felt that Nie Soon was amiable, and it was not an illusion. Meng Heng and his wife whispered a few words to each other and fell asleep peacefully. Nie Soon and his wife, on the other hand, could not fall asleep. Zhu Qingning was the daughter of Master Yuan Jing. Naturally, she was not an ordinary woman. She chatted with Meng Heng's wife for quite a while. It looked like they were just chatting about family matters, but in reality, she had managed to dig out the other party's background. First uncle is a Zongzi of the Meng clan after all. I really don't know what the Meng clan is thinking. They actually gave him a wife like this. In terms of family background, this lady was a humiliation to Meng Heng. Zhu Qingning said, Fortunately, eldest sister-in-law has a good temper. She has a good relationship with eldest uncle, which is a blessing in disguise. If eldest sister-in-law is a shrewish and vulgar woman, eldest uncle will feel wronged. Nie Soon's face darkened. He had thought that Meng Heng was living a good life, but after getting to know him better, he realized that his life was even worse than that of a bastard from a branch family. Humph, the Mengs mix up the lineal and the concubine. It's obvious that they're not a particular family. It's not surprising that they've gone too far. Nie Soon didn't intend to acknowledge this big brother, but seeing his own blood relative being bullied, he felt unhappy. What's your plan, Lang Jun? Zhu Qingning asked Nie Soon. I heard that first uncle is very talented. If you two brothers... Nie Soon shook his head. That's impossible. Our lord is thirsty for talents and respects them. But have you seen what he thinks of Meng Heng? Zhu Qingning's heart tightened. Indeed, Huang Song sent people to settle Meng Heng and his wife down and did nothing else. Nie Soon explained, Meng Heng wants to rely on Lu Shi. If my lord were to snatch him away halfway, it would be hard to explain to Lu Shi. Meng Heng belonged to Jiang Pengji's camp. He had no reason to go to Huang Song's camp. Zhu Qingning sighed. If eldest uncle submitted to prefecture overseer Lu, then wouldn't you and him? Before the collapse of the Mengs, the alliance between Huang Song and Jiang Pengji was still reliable. Once the Mengs fell, wouldn't the former allies immediately turn against each other? If they had a falling out, wouldn't this pair of brothers be fighting each other? Just thinking about it made him feel like he was being abused. Nie Soon said calmly, Fura need not worry about this. The snow is really heavy. Jiang Pengji raised her hand and patted the accumulated snow on her shoulder. The snowflakes were huge, like a ball of white fluff. No matter how she patted, the oncoming snowflakes still hit her face. The army advanced slowly in the snow, like a long and black worm wriggling on a piece of white paper. The audience chatted in twos and threes. Seeing Jiang Pengji in such a sorry state, they laughed and teased her. Chen Shi Ruyan, Streamer, the snow outside is so heavy. Why don't you hide in the carriage for a while? Quilt Nwanren, ha ha ha, the commenter above, I'm afraid you don't know what stupid thing the streamer has done. She'd rather be blown to death by the north wind or drown in the snow than run into the carriage. Otherwise, why do you think she's staying outside in the cold wind? Quilt Xueqi, what did the streamer do this time? Recently, the live stream has been all about marching. It's boring, so I didn't follow her. Fairy Queen's Crimson, #picknose. The streamer is good in every aspect, but she's not enlightened when it comes to relationships. If she's stupid, it must have something to do with Beauty CI. The streamer had a stomachache and complained about a stomachache. Others thought she was on her period. Beauty CI also mistakenly thought so. In the end, the streamer took the opportunity to sleep on Beauty C's thigh. The audience was surprised. It was just her period. How could that be considered stupid? Fairy Queen's Crimson. Not to mention that the streamer only had a stomachache and didn't have her period. Even if she did, which family's period lasts for a month? You're not mistaken. The streamer used this lame excuse to take advantage of Beauty CI for a month. In the end, she foolishly exposed herself. Was the streamer really a woman in her previous life? Menstruation comes 12 times a year, not once a year. It lasts for a month. Jiang Pengji looked at the bullet screen and secretly rolled her eyes. In her era, women didn't have this thing at all, okay? She only knew that women in ancient times had it, but she didn't know the specifics. Because Lu Shi's body was genetically modified, he didn't have a period at all. Jiang Pengji was even less clear about the details. The stomachache was misunderstood as menstrual pain. She wanted to explain, but she didn't expect him to be so obedient to her. Jiang Pengji simply went with the flow. She took the opportunity to take advantage of him and take advantage of him. In the end, she exposed herself. Wei Si's expression. Chapter 1034. The northern borderline had just been stabilized, and Jiang Pengji had to rush to the front lines with her troops. She could only appoint her confidant to deal with the aftermath of the northern borderline. The northern borderline had been renamed Beizhou and was officially included in Jiang Pengji's sphere of influence. However, for convenience's sake, the northern borderline was still the northern borderline. Sun Wen was appointed as the deputy governor of Beizhou. Qiguan Rang stayed behind in Chongzhou to govern the prefecture and to support Sun Wen to stabilize the northern borderline. Apart from that, Jiang Pengji also asked Fu Wang to stay behind and guard the two prefectures. Jiang Pengji had thought about these decisions carefully. Sun Wen was over 40 years old. Although he was not considered old, he could not run around with the army. They had just gone through a huge battle. Jiang Pengji decided to let Sun Wen have a good vacation and stay behind to handle government affairs. Qiguan Rang was familiar with the affairs of Chongzhou. He was cautious and thorough. He and Sun Wen should work well together. As the commander-in-chief of the three armies, Fu Wang had high prestige in the army. If he guarded the two prefectures, she believed that no one would dare to provoke him. Sun Wen, who did not know anything, was grateful. His arms and legs were old and needed to rest for a while. Only Qiguan Rang looked indifferent. For Jiang Pengji's strategists, going to war was equivalent to a paid vacation. Staying at home was worse than death. The Lord really had a true love for Sun Wen. Before conquering the northern borderline, they barely had enough manpower. Now that they had the territory of the northern borderline, they were starting to lack manpower again. Thinking of the days when he had to work overtime, Qiguan Rang fanned his feather fan even more quickly. Jiang Pengji arranged for him to stay in Chongzhou, but the focus of his work was still related to the northern borderline. Although the remnants of the northern borderline were almost wiped out, after the baptism of war, the economy and politics of the northern borderline had suffered a huge blow. Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen guarded the northern borderline together to deal with the aftermath. Only then could Jiang Pengji truly feel at ease and have no worries. Sun Wen was still a newbie. Faced with Jiang Pengji's trust, he was touched and his heart warmed. As for Qiguan Rang, he could already foresee the coming year of dire straits. Before they left, Jiang Pengji threw a problem to the two of them. Previously, in order to create more trouble for the northern borderline, Zixiao encouraged the ordinary herdsmen of the northern borderline to raise rabbits and sheep under my instruction. These two little things look harmless to humans and animals, but once there are too many of them, the northern borderline's pasture will suffer a destructive blow. Fortunately, the scale was still very small, and the rabbits and sheep did not cause too much damage to the northern borderline. This matter will be handed over to the two of you to supervise. The government will do their best to encourage the people to hunt wild rabbits and goats. Qiguan Rang secretly clicked his tongue. He knew very well who came up with the rabbit and sheep strategy. But the Lord took the blame and anxiously defended Zixiao. If this wasn't true love, what was it? Sun Wen frowned and said, if the government buys the rabbits and goats from the herdsman will only raise more. If that was the case, it would instead look like the government was encouraging the herdsman to raise rabbits and sheep. Zhang Pengji smiled and said, that's simple. Lower the purchase price of domestic rabbits and goats, and raise the price of wild rabbits and goats. When there's not much profit to be made from domestic animals, the herdsmen will naturally turn their attention to the prey on the grasslands. In carrying out this plan, we must pay attention to those who fish in troubled waters. We can't let them use domesticated rabbits and sheep as wild ones. It was not easy to distinguish between domesticated and wild, but Zhang Pengji believed that this problem would not stump the two people in front of her. In addition to eliminating wild rabbits and goats, Zhang Pengji also asked people to prepare many drought-resistant and cold-resistant plants, such as Chinese sandalwood. Chongzhou's Chinese sandalwood was the main source of Xian paper. Chongzhou alone might not be able to supply it. There were many places in the northern borderline that had similar geographical conditions to Chongzhou. Zhang Pengji felt that they could try to import them. Regarding the aftermath of the northern borderline, Zhang Pengji, Sun Wen, and Qiguan Rang discussed for a long time. After confirming that there were no major problems, they left with the troops. Leaving Sun Wen and Qiguan Rang behind, Zhang Pengji only had Wei Xiai and Feng Zhan as her strategists. There were too few people. Passing by Wanzhou, Zhang Pengji took Feng Jin, Meng Hun, and Qi Kuang away. Feng Jin learned of this arrangement and said faintly, my lord is really cold-hearted and heartless. It was not easy for him to have good news with Jingxian. He was anxiously waiting for the second child to germinate, but his lord took him away with a decree. When the war was over, maybe the second child would be weaned. Ever since he followed his lord, he realized that he had not had a good new year for a few years. He was either in the middle of a war or on his way to the battlefield. Zhang Pengji pursed her lips and ignored Feng Jin's resentful gaze. We're almost at Hada County. Feng Zhan wrapped himself up into a ball and slightly lifted the curtain of the carriage. The cold wind from outside immediately rushed in and hit him in the face. He spat twice and hurriedly lowered the curtain. Chapter 1035. It was silent in the tent. Only the crackling of the candles could be heard. Nie Sun's heart skipped a beat as dozens of pairs of eyes stared at him. His expression did not change. He stepped out of the line politely and bowed respectfully. Because the lighting equipment was outdated, the view in the tent was slightly dim. The candlelight flickered and the shadows of the people were indistinct. There was an indescribable sense of hazy beauty. When the young man with a speck of sand between his eyebrows stepped out of the line, the bullet screen in the streaming room gushed like water from a well, densely packed. Gay Mei. Oh, so handsome, streamer, I fell in love at first sight again. Midnight epilepsy. He's obviously a very beautiful young man, but I see an indescribable sexiness in him. Mom, come and take a look. This young man in the streaming room is seducing your daughter. I'm so excited that I'm speechless. I'll lick him first. Zawalluo soundless. Mom asked me why I'm licking the screen like crazy. I said the screen is too dirty. Ishio Xiniangxiang. Streamer, can you help me get this handsome guy's phone number? I've taken a fancy to him. Xingyuan Miao Miao. Simiai's throne as the #1 beauty is teetering on the brink of collapse. Streamer, why don't you shed all pretense of cordiality with Huang Song and dig this beauty out with a hoe? If you dig her out, the 2 most beautiful flowers in the world will be planted in your fence. Just thinking about it makes me excited. For the audience, ancient gentlemen were only bound to words such as old-fashioned, elegant, and dignified. They never thought that he could be sexy. To describe it in a very vulgar way, Nie Sun was a walking hormone. Needless to say any teasing words, just one look at him would make one's heart itch. He was wrapped up tightly and dressed properly, but at first glance, he was inexplicably sexy. The cinnabar mole between his eyebrows was the finishing touch. It immediately grabbed the attention of others. Huang Song's smile froze. He noticed that the atmosphere in the main tent was a little stiff, so he wanted to open his mouth to smooth things over. What a joke. They were a gang of scoundrels who had been to brothels and drank wine together. How could he not know Zhang Pengji's bad character? Before Huang Song could speak, Jiang Pengji tilted her neck and all the wine in the goblet slipped down her throat. Her eyes were misty. Cheng Yun. Could it be that there is a tiger sitting in front of you? Jiang Pengji raised her hand to her forehead. Her cheeks were flushed. She seemed to be drunk. The candlelight in the tent is very dim. I can't see clearly. You're swaying back and forth. It's too strenuous. Huang Song's heart sank. He couldn't tell if Jiang Pengji was really drunk or pretending to be drunk. He could only give Nie Sun a look. Nie Sun pursed his lips and took small steps forward, but he was panicking inside. He was worried that Jiang Pengji, who was obsessed with appearances, would covet Nie Sun's beauty. Nie Sun received Huang Song's signal and returned to his seat calmly. Apart from this small interlude, the atmosphere of the entire banquet was harmonious. Jiang Pengji was in a rather good mood. The wine in the goblet never stopped flowing. Huang Song was not the Huang Song of the past. He would control himself when drinking and would not get too drunk. Jiang Pengji sighed in her heart. When she competed with Huang Song and Feng Ju in the past, they would be so drunk that they would hide under the low table and be unconscious. Now they had grown up, and were more rational. Naturally, they would not indulge in drinking. They would not do it now, and there would be no chance in the future. I'm drunk. My head hurts. Jiang Pengji put down the goblet and hurriedly waved her hands. I feel uncomfortable drinking. Seeing this, Huang Song continued. Since you can't drink anymore, let's not drink anymore. Get someone to help you down to rest and sober up. Jiang Pengji closed her eyes and nodded slightly. Since their lord had left, Wei Ci and the others naturally could not continue to stay. They all found excuses to leave. The banquet was over, and the strong smell of wine lingered in the tent. Captain Yuan Chong muttered, I knew that Mr. Nie's beauty was unparalleled, but I didn't expect that even the magistrate of Liuzhou could not resist you. Jiang Pengji's behavior at the beginning was obviously taking advantage of being drunk to flirt and lust for his beauty. Yuan Chong's voice was not loud, but Nie Sun, who was sitting not far away, heard it clearly. His face darkened slightly. Yuan Chong was not only Huang Song's fan, but he was also Huang Song's cousin. Nie Sun could not refute him. Yuan Chong still had a sense of propriety, but Yuan Chong's second uncle, Yuan Xian, was not so restrained. Chapter 1036. Seeing that Yuan Xian was going overboard, Nie Sun slammed the table with a gloomy face. The force was so great that even the bowls and chopsticks on the table shook. Everyone in the tent was silent. Even their breathing seemed to be concealed. Do you think I'm wrong? Yuan Xian was a burly old general with a thick beard on his coarse face. His appearance was rough. He sat there like a small mountain, as wide as two Nie Suns. He spoke in a low, muffled voice that was as loud and powerful as a large bell. I forgot to restrain myself just now. I drank too much and lost my composure in public. Please punish me, my lord. Huang Song's stern gaze swept over Yuan Xian as a silent warning. Then he said pleasantly, if that's the case, I'll go back to sober up first. Nie Sun got up and left. He faintly heard Yuan Xian's cold snort behind him. He secretly clenched his fists. The cold wind outside blew on his face, dispersing the lingering smell of alcohol around him. Where there were people, there was no lack of conflicts and disputes. Especially in a group with a complicated power structure, it was easier to breed discord. Civil officials and military generals were two conflicting groups that were difficult to reconcile. Nie Sun was too good-looking, so it was inevitable that he would be looked down upon and snubbed by people, especially military generals. They usually knew how to restrain themselves, but now that they had drunk too much, they unconsciously showed it. This was not a big conflict, and Nie Sun did not take it to heart. What worried him was Jiang Pengji's reaction. Others thought that Jiang Pengji was attracted to him, but Nie Sun did not think so. In terms of appearance, Wei Ci, who worked in Jiang Pengji's tent, was even better than him. Other than that, Nie Sun could not find anything wrong with him. He just felt very flustered, which made him lose his sense of propriety. On the other side, Jiang Pengji was supported by Wei Ci back to the bedroom where she was staying. Now that there's no one around, my lord, you don't have to continue pretending, right? How could he not know how much his lord could drink? The drunk, Jiang Pengji leaned against him. When she heard this, she could not help but smile delightedly.
She wrapped her arms around his neck, and with a little force, she rolled onto the bed with Wei Si, pressing half of her body on top of him.
My lord! Wei Si was so angry that his face turned slightly green. He raised his hand and tried to push her away. Zixiao, what happened to you Xian was indeed my fault. Don't be so cold and heartless. Jiang Pengji looked like she was hugging a large doll. She rubbed his neck and mumbled, You've been angry for so many days. It's time to cool down. It would have been better if she had not said it. Wei Si was even angrier after she had said it. Was he such a narrow-minded person? I'm not angry because of that. Wei Si liked cleanliness. Even if he drank alcohol, he would only drink 2 cups and rarely touch the smell of alcohol. Jiang Pengji drank a lot of wine. She was like a moving wine jar. He almost fainted from the smell. Then, is it because of Nie Chengyun? Jiang Pengji smiled slyly. Is Zixiao jealous?
Wei Si said. What's there to be jealous of?
Nie Sun has been targeted by the Lord. She can't wait to pity him. He knew Jiang Pengji too well. Her actions just now were obviously to trick Nie Sun. It was a pity that Nie Sun didn't realize it. Jiang Pengji let go of his neck and rolled around like a child. She was drunk. Wei Si was speechless. The Lord was really regressing as she lived. He secretly face-bombed. It was worth it to go along with her wishes. Otherwise, if others saw her childish side, where would the dignity of the Lord be? How does the Lord plan to trick Nie Sun? Wei Si asked. I'm slow-witted. I can't see through the Lord's arrangements. Jiang Pengji stopped tormenting him. She smiled and said, This Nie Sun is very likely to be my poor cousin. Wei Si was surprised. Cousin. Jiang Pengji said, Zixiao, you know that my father's legal wife isn't my biological mother. She's my mother's concubine sister, my aunt. Before she married my father, she was Meng Zhan's legal wife. She and Meng Zhan had 2 legitimate sons. One was the eldest cousin, Meng Hang, and the other was the second cousin. When the second cousin was born, Meng Zhan's favorite concubine also gave birth to an illegitimate son. Meng Zhan favored his concubine over his wife and confused the illegitimate son. He actually marked the illegitimate son as the legitimate son and threw the legitimate second son to his favorite concubine. However, his favorite concubine had a vicious heart. She sent someone to deal with the legitimate second son. My aunt said that the second cousin was born with a cinnabar between his eyebrows. It's very easy to recognize him. Wei Si frowned. You identified him as Meng Erlang just based on a cinnabar between his eyebrows? Jiang Pengji smiled. Of course not. The most important thing is Nie Sun's appearance. He looks very much like my aunt. Similar appearance and the same cinnabar. Just based on these 2 points, Jiang Pengji dared to confirm Nie Sun's background. Wei Si's mind whirred. He said, I heard Yumo say that Nie Sun came to Dongqing from Zhongzhou to look for blood relatives. In other words, Nie Sun was very likely to be Jiang Pengji's second cousin. Jiang Pengji said, I can feel it. He seems to know this too, but he didn't come forward to acknowledge me. Wei Si's eyebrows twitched violently. He suddenly thought of the pitiful Yang Si in his previous life. In his previous life, Yang Si obediently stayed in Huang Song's tent as a strategist. At most, he was a little greedy. It was such a small flaw that the Lord actually grasped and used it as a breakthrough to drive a wedge between Huang Song and Yang Si. Could it be? Jiang Pengji snorted and laughed. If Nie Sun follows Bogeo, it will be difficult to make a move in the future. I am a person who does not hold back. If I accidentally kill him, my aunt will be very sad if she finds out. Just in case, it's better to help one's own people. Wei Si was speechless. His heart ached even more for Nie Sun. What should he do? My lord wants to drive a wedge between Huang Song and Nie Sun? Jiang Pengji gasped and blinked innocently. Zixiao, why are you speaking so harshly? What do you mean by driving a wedge? Do I look like the kind of restless third child who likes to poach others? Bogeo and Chengyun have a close relationship. I won't do such a wicked thing. Wei Si was speechless. Even a ghost wouldn't believe a word of what you said. Jiang Pengji stopped joking and said calmly, Bogeo has a suspicious personality, but being suspicious doesn't mean he suspects everything. If I drive a wedge between them right from the start, the effect will be counterproductive. After all, Bogeo isn't a fool. He has also grown up and is no longer the fair-weather friend who can be easily bullied. I don't know how Nye Sun found out about our relationship, but he didn't tell Huang Song. Nye Sun hid the truth to avoid arousing Huang Song's suspicions. However, the more secretive he is, the easier it is for others to suspect him. She laughed coldly. If he doesn't confess some things early on, he won't be able to say them when he wants to because he'll lose the best opportunity. He didn't confess earlier but chose to confess when others suspected him. Wouldn't this attract suspicion? Wei Si sighed. What could he say? No one who was targeted by his lord would have a good ending. Zhang Pengji said, however, our current enemy is the Meng family of Cangzhou. I have the intention to plot against Bogeo and Cheng Yun, but I have to pay attention to the timing. Wei Si's face was cold. She was indeed very careful about the timing, but it didn't stop her from planting a seed of suspicion in Huang Song and the others. Huang Song's face carried a hint of anger, which immediately subdued Yuan Xin. The latter lowered his head in embarrassment and drank his wine, not daring to lose his temper again. At the end of the banquet, Feng Ju and Cheng Jing left one after another. The other strategists and generals also dispersed. Cheng Jing took a few quick steps to catch up with Feng Ju. Based on my understanding of Lu Shi, he is not a bad disciple who indulges in beauty. Feng Ju was not surprised by Cheng Jing's appearance. He said in a low voice, "Of course she's not. Not only is she not, but she's also as cunning as a schemer." His second brother stayed behind in Wanzhou during the Beijiang campaign. But now, you've brought second brother and Meng Hun here. How can this be good intentions? At the banquet, he saw his second brother, Feng Jin, whom he had not seen for many years. Although Feng Ju looked calm on the surface, his heart was in turmoil. Meng Hun used to be a military officer in Meng County in Tsang Prefecture. The Mengs of Tsang Prefecture caused him to lose his wife and daughter. It was reasonable for Zhang Pengji to bring Meng Hun along. However, why did she specially bring Feng Jin here? Feng Ju did not dare to think too deeply. In fact, Feng Ju and Cheng Jing thought too much of Zhang Pengji. If she was so evil, she would have dragged Cheng Cheng and Cheng Yuan along. Cheng Cheng was Cheng Jing's nephew, and Cheng Yuan was Cheng Jing's grandnephew. Cheng Jing frowned. Cheng Yun is from Zhongzhou. He has never been to Dongqing before this. It's impossible for him to have any interaction with Lu Shi. Feng Ju looked down. Don't forget, although Cheng Yun is from Zhongzhou, his ancestral bloodline is in Dongqing. Nye Sun's search for relatives was not a secret at all. Cheng Jing's eyebrows twitched violently. You mean, Cheng Yun is related to Lu Shi? If that's the case, why would Cheng Yun hide it from us? They were certain that it was the first time Lu Shi and Nye Sun had met. If the two were related by blood, there was no reason that Lu Shi would know but Nye Sun did not. It's not that. Don't forget, Master Yuan Jing is Cheng Yun's father-in-law. He's even a teacher in Lu Shi's territory. Feng Ju added coldly, Teske. No matter what he's up to, we have to be on guard. Zhang Pengji did things as she pleased. Although Huang Song had formed an alliance with her, the alliance was just a verbal one. There was no deep entanglement of interests. Without a certain entanglement of interests as a guarantee, such an alliance was too fragile. It was like a flower in the mirror or the moon in the water. Zhang Pengji flirted with Nye Sun at the banquet. This alerted the strategists in Huang Song's tent. The generals were still in a daze. As the initiator of this incident, Zhang Pengji did not make any further moves. It was as if she was really tempted by his lust. Chapter 1038. Zhang Pengji listened attentively to Meng Heng's narration. She could not help but frown. She knew that Meng Heng wasn't treated well in Cangzhou, but she didn't expect his situation to be this bad. All of this had to start from Meng Heng's childhood. Back then, Gu Zhan could not even take care of herself, much less her eldest son. Gu Min and her husband took Gu Zhan away from the Meng residence and let Meng Zhan and Gu Zhan divorce, but they could not take Meng Heng away. Meng Heng struggled to live to the age of enlightenment. He did not live like a Zongzi. Instead, he lived like the most unfavored son of a concubine. From the age of 4 to 8, He felt that Meng Zhan's favorite concubine was looking at him more and more unfriendly. In order to escape from the persecution of his concubine, Meng Heng, who was only 8 years old, found a way out for himself. Late at night, he paid a visit to the teacher who taught at the family school. From the teacher, he obtained a letter of recommendation for Meng Heng to go to the Dongyang private school in Shangjing. Although it was said to be a student, it was actually a hostage. The Meng family of Cangzhou held the lifeline of the horse farm in Dongqing. How could the emperor be at ease? He was constantly thinking of taking back control. Of course, the Meng family would not compromise. But if they did not, it would be hard to explain to the royal family. Meng Heng took advantage of this opportunity to go to Shangjing with the recommendation of the teacher. While studying, he also took the initiative to be a hostage to ease the conflict between the emperor and the Meng family. With this reason, Meng Heng also received the immunity medallion. No matter how much Meng Zhan's favorite concubine hated Meng Heng, she couldn't really kill him. Not long after Jiang Pengji and Feng Jin met, she heard news about Meng Heng from him. What had Feng Jin said about Meng Heng? If Meng Heng hadn't accidentally revealed his identity, many of his classmates wouldn't have known that Meng Heng, who lived a simple life, was actually the Zongzi of the Meng family in Song Prefecture. Other than returning to Cangzhou for a few days during the new year, Meng Heng basically stayed in Shangjing to study. He stayed for 10 years. In the assessment 8 years ago, Meng Heng had wanted to enter the top 3 and become an official. In this way, he wouldn't have to worry about Meng Zhan's favorite concubine when he returned to the Mengs. Who knew that Meng Liang's scandal would be exposed, and the Meng county governor's office would be burned to the ground by Meng Hun and his men. Then, the Song Prefecture mutiny happened. How could this scandal be suppressed? As Meng Liang's eldest brother, Meng Heng was unfortunately affected and failed the test. Not to mention the top 3, Meng Heng couldn't even enter the top 100. After losing Meng Liang, the Meng family thought of him. More than a dozen letters to his family called him back. Meng Heng set off from Shangjing. On his way there, he met Jiang Pengji, who was on her way to Langya County. It was the first time the two cousins had met. Meng Heng, who had returned to the Mengs, felt as if his heart was being pricked by needles when he saw the no longer prosperous Cangzhou and the tired and poor people. The Meng family of Cangzhou used to be the guardian of the people of this land. Since when did the Meng family become the nightmare of the people and the demons who exploited them? Meng Heng tried to make amends and restore the reputation of the Mengs. However, the head of the family was Meng Zhan, and Meng Zhan did not like him at all. In this era where the patriarch was the king, Meng Heng's struggles and hard work were a joke. As a son, the only thing he could do was admonish him. He had tried many times, but the results were not ideal. He didn't know why, but Meng Zhan's attitude toward him was getting colder and colder. He could even see the deep hatred and murderous intent in Meng Zhan's eyes. To be honest, my lord, although Heng's ancestral hall was removed and his surname was removed, Meng Heng is Meng Heng. I dare not forget the teachings of my ancestors. Meng Heng said, if the Mengs of Cangzhou are done for, it is also fate. I dare not have the slightest resentment. I only ask for my lord's grace. Jiang Pengji looked at Meng Heng and guessed his request. You want me to give you the surname Meng and keep the ancestral hall of the Mengs? Jiang Pengji could not understand the persistence of people in ancient times to pass on their surnames and bloodlines. Although she did not understand it, she respected it. Meng Heng's eyes flashed with surprise and joy. He bowed his head and said, I sincerely ask my lord to grant my wish. There were many people with the surname Meng in the world, but not all of them were from the Mengs of Cangzhou. Take Wei Ci as an example. The Weis of Langyi were separated from Bianzhou in Zhongzhou, and moved to Langyi to establish their own clan. Both were from the Weis, but when it came to their ancestors, one was from Bianzhou and the other from Langyi. Meng Heng planned to establish his own clan. When the time came, the Mengs of Cangzhou would be annihilated by Jiang Pengji, but the Mengs would not be completely wiped out because he would still be alive. Jiang Pengji would naturally agree to such a small request. Okay. I'll do as Cousin Heng says. Thank you, my lord. After discussing official matters, Jiang Pengji quietly changed the topic to Meng Heng's recent life. She asked him if he had any contact with the people under Huang Song's command. It was relatively easy for smart people to talk to smart people. Meng Heng immediately understood that Jiang Pengji wanted to poach him in private. But Meng Heng said awkwardly, I don't have much contact with the people under Magistrate Huang's command. Chapter 1039. I really don't know what's there to discuss. Can't we just fight our way over? Yuan Xian lost his patience when he heard that there was no progress after an hour of discussion. No matter how we challenge them, those bastards from Cangzhou don't respond. They were all scared out of their wits, so why would they take the initiative to come out? If they don't want to fight, can't we fight them? Yuan Xian did not deliberately suppress his voice, so everyone in the tent could hear him. Huang Song looked embarrassed, and he looked a little embarrassed. The generals under his command were impulsive and reckless, which made him lose face as well. Moreover, Yuan Xian was his uncle from the same clan, so he had no choice but to help clean up after him. Zhang Pengji wasn't angry. Instead, she smiled and said, "That's true. The general guarding Hanchong Pass is afraid of the military strength of the two families, so he doesn't come out. They have the danger pass to rely on, so they naturally aren't afraid. But we can't afford to drag this on. However, the Great Cold Mountain Pass is easy to defend and hard to attack. If the two clans take the initiative to send out their troops, they will fall right into the enemy's trap. Who knows how much of a price they will have to pay to attack such a dangerous pass?" Yuan Xian was secretly warned by Huang Song. He still felt a little guilty, but he didn't expect Zhang Pengji to stand up for him. However, even though Zhang Pengji tried to smooth things over, Yuan Xian did not stop while he was ahead. His personality was very stubborn, and he would not easily change his instincts. Yuan Xian did not have a good impression on Zhang Pengji. Even if she was magnanimous and forgave him, he would not be grateful. Instead, he felt that Zhang Pengji's temper was too soft and easy to manipulate. Yes. This was probably what it meant to be a kind person would be bullied and a kind horse would be ridden. For the sake of Huang Song, Zhang Pengji did not argue with Yuan Xian, but Yuan Xian refused to quit while he was ahead. Who doesn't know these principles? Although I am old, I am not deaf. I still remember what the advisors have said. Yuan Xian said with some arrogance, though Cold Chong Pass is a dangerous pass that is easy to defend and hard to attack, it is not impregnable. To take down Hanchong Pass, we naturally have to rely on the hard work of the soldiers. We can't just rely on a few people moving their mouths and the Hanchong Pass will change hands. Although Zhang Pengji was fighting in an away game, Huang Song wanted to express his respect for her. The entire military meeting was led by Zhang Pengji. The strategists who spoke just now were basically people on Zhang Pengji's side. Yuan Xian's words were no different from a slap in the face. Huang Song's face darkened. He knew that this uncle of his had a bad temper, but he didn't expect him to go crazy regardless of the situation. Little did they know that Yuan Xian couldn't stand it either. Hada County was a territory under Huang Song's rule. Huang Song had to endure the indignation of allowing others to dictate what to do in his own territory and enjoy the limelight. Zhang Pengji smiled faintly and looked at Yuan Xian coldly. Yuan Xian felt a chill run down his spine under her gaze, as if an evil chill had spread from his feet to his brain, calming him down quite a bit. He thought that Zhang Pengji would fly into a rage, but she turned around and asked Huang Song, "Bogeo, can you introduce this warrior to me?" Huang Song's heart thumped, but he didn't dare to speak up for Yuan Xian. In this situation, he vaguely felt that he had returned to a few years ago. He was still shrouded in the shadow of Zhang Pengji's violence. He is Yuan Xin, Song's uncle. He is loyal and upright, but his actions are a bit reckless and impulsive. He still needs more tempering. Zhang Pengji teased him with a smile. He has a good personality, but he offends people easily. Bogeo, you haven't had an easy time all these years. In her opinion, the Lord was like the head of a kindergarten. Her subordinates were all problematic children, and Yuan Xian was the one with the worst temper. It really hasn't been easy. Huang Song laughed bitterly and self-deprecatingly said, "I only hope that he hasn't offended Lanting too much." From such a familiar tone, everyone knew that the two of them were very close in private. Yuan Xian had offended so many people, but they could still talk and laugh. How could their relationship not be good? Zhang Pengji smiled and winked at Huang Song. "I wouldn't go so far as to offend him too much," Zhang Pengji said. In the past, the imperial court valued literature and restrained the military. How many men from the Wu family were like delicate, beautiful women? If the soldiers at the border were like Captain Yuan Xan, how would the motley crew of the northern borderline dare to attack the border? In her opinion, the civil officials were the brains and knees of the country, while the military generals were the backbone of the country. Both were equally important. She spent years training an army that was full of courage, but there were not many generals who satisfied her. Yuan Xian was indeed hot-tempered. If he hadn't offended her, Jiang Pengji would have admired him. Of course, she would get back at him for what he had done today. Huang Song secretly heaved a sigh of relief and followed Jiang Pengji's lead to divert the original topic. Yuan Xian felt like he had punched cotton. He didn't feel good. Throughout the meeting, he was somewhat silent. Without Yuan Xian's interruptions, everyone slowly came up with a clear battle plan. However, Yuan Xian's words still made them pay attention. The second half of the meeting was much quieter. The terrain of Hanchong Pass was treacherous. It seemed like one man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. It was definitely not advisable to attack by force. The Mengs, a formidable enemy, was still eyeing them. Jiang Pengji and Huang Song couldn't afford to lose too many soldiers at Hanchong Pass. After some discussion, everyone decided to lure the snake out of its hole. Since attacking by force was not advisable, they could only let the general in charge of Hanchong Pass lead his troops out of the pass. Then, they could take advantage of the fact that the pass was empty to launch a sneak attack. As he listened, Meng Hun vaguely felt that it was somewhat familiar. Back then, didn't the Lord and the others use this strategy to deal with General Fu? Meng Hun clearly remembered that the Lord and the others had tricked Fu Wang into leading his troops out of the pass. Then, they had taken the opportunity to break through Jiamen Pass. Feng Zhan said with a smile, "It doesn't matter if the strategy is new or old, as long as it works." Meng Hun secretly frowned. The general in charge of Hanchong Pass is timid and conservative. They would rather guard the pass than send troops out easily. If the battle dragged on, Jiang Pengji would be the one to suffer. After all, it was a long battle in an away game. The pressure on the transportation of grain was great. It couldn't withstand a long battle. As long as Huang Song and Jiang Pengji's alliance had problems, the Mengs and Songzhou could find a chance to attack them one by one. "That's why we need to lure the snake out of its hole," Feng Zhan said. "It's the New Year's Day soon. What should we eat?" Meng Hun. Was Feng Longzi possessed by Yangtze? The battle was more important. Why was he thinking about food? After a while, Meng Hun finally understood the deeper meaning of Feng Zhan's words. Jiang Pengji and Huang Song set up camp every day to challenge the enemy. Just as they had feared, the general in charge of Hanchong Pass was a coward. They weren't annoyed. Instead, they rewarded the troops with fat cattle, sheep, and fine wine. Every night, they lit a bonfire and sang and danced. The soldiers drank until they were drunk. Such a lively scene naturally couldn't escape the eyes of the scouts of Hanchong Pass. The soldiers on the city wall were all dumbfounded. "Don't be impatient. This is clearly their plan to lure the enemy. We can't fall for it." Chapter 1040. He was talking about luring the enemy, but he wasn't sure about it. If it was really a luring tactic, how could it be like this for half a month? Every morning, he received reports from scouts that Lu Shi's army and Huang Song's army had another night of fun. The general's mood was like a steamer. On one hand, he told himself that it was the enemy's luring tactic to lure them out of Hanchong Pass. On the other hand, he couldn't help but wonder. Maybe it wasn't a luring tactic. Maybe the enemy was too arrogant? At first, he was still very vigilant and determined. However, as he missed the opportunity to annihilate the enemy again and again, he couldn't stay calm anymore. According to the reports from scouts, Huang Song's and Lu Shi's armies were partying all night, except for basic patrols. They weren't on guard at all. If he was braver and took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, the enemy might have been wiped out. So what if it was bait set by the enemy? They were so drunk that they didn't have the strength to fight. If they launched a sneak attack, Lu Shi would be shooting himself in the foot. Faced with a dilemma, the general of Hanchong Pass was hesitant. He could only watch as the enemy camp burned brightly. Jiang Pengji and Huang Song predicted that the general of Hanchong Pass would be suspicious and wouldn't send troops easily. In order to put on a more realistic act and to let the soldiers relax and have a good new year, They had really gone crazy in the first few days. Ah! What a carefree and happy day. Feng Zhan was wearing a crown and a belt. He wore a lacquered gauze crown on his head. It was proper attire, but his waist was loose and his clothes were crooked, revealing his thin collarbone and a small part of his chest. He leaned against the table and sat casually. He held a wine cup in his hand and was drunk. His cheeks were red. Today was New Year's Eve. As usual, they had to gather for a New Year's banquet. It was a festive day, so they naturally had to wear formal clothes. Even Feng Zhan, the prodigal son, took out the clothes that he hadn't worn many times. If every day is a New Year's Eve, what regrets would there be in life? Feng Zhan sighed. His peach blossom eyes were filled with tears and seemed to be flowing. Feng Jin frowned and warned Feng Zhan in a low voice. Han Chong Pass can't wait any longer. They'll probably make a move soon. You should restrain yourself. At first, Feng Jin really didn't like this unruly colleague who risked his life to court death. But now he let him be. She only hoped that he wouldn't make a fool of himself during the annual banquet. Feng Jin was also dressed in formal attire, but he and Feng Zhan were two completely different styles. If one were to say that Feng was a wanton man who indulged himself in the wilderness, then Feng Jin was a refined and courteous gentleman. The former's sitting posture was casual, while the latter's hair was neatly combed. New Year's banquet, bup. Feng Zhan burped and said drunkenly, "Didn't the Lord say that we should act freely and not be restrained?" Feng Jin resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Feng Zhan said slyly, bestowing the same full moon, "I wonder what's the situation on Wenjing and Zidao's side?" When he thought about how he was enjoying himself while his colleagues spent the holidays with a pile of bamboo slips, Feng Zhan felt his whole body relax. Feng Jin said with a headache, "You should stop." If he liked to attract hatred so much, sooner or later he would be beaten to death with a gunny sack. Feng Zhan smiled and pulled Li Yun, who was beside him. He said, "Hanmei, pour the wine. We won't go home until we're drunk tonight." It wasn't that there were no conflicts between the civil and military officials under Jiang Pengji's banner, but the conflicts weren't that obvious. Feng Longzi often hooked up with the military officials to drink in secret. Li Yun, the little angel, was humble and eager to learn. He often asked for guidance from a few teachers. With more communication, the estrangement and conflicts between them decreased. In addition, Jiang Pengji was skilled in both literature and martial arts. She tried her best to be fair and bring out the strengths of the civil and military officials. She didn't favor one and discriminate against the other. This made the overall atmosphere harmonious and the civil and military officials got along well. Even if there were conflicts between the two sides, most of them would be resolved in private and wouldn't be brought out in the open. Looking at the harmonious situation between the civil and military officials in the tent, Feng Ju, who was the messenger to Jiang Pengji, felt upset. Most of Huang Song's military officials were from the Yuanshe family. They were considered Huang Song's clansmen. The two had a close relationship. Although it was a good thing to not avoid enemies and not avoid relatives, the military officials under Huang Song seemed to have a tendency to unite and fight against outsiders. Under Huang Song's suppression, they didn't cause any trouble, but everything couldn't be compared. Feng Ju drank a few glasses of wine on behalf of Huang Song and Jiang Pengji. He said his New Year's greetings and left with the excuse that he couldn't hold his liquor. Seeing that, Feng Jin secretly informed Jiang Pengji and got up to follow him. Huaijia. Leaving the hot commander's tent, the cold wind and snow outside made Feng Jin shiver. Second brother. Feng Ju turned his head upon hearing the sound and called out respectfully. Sigh. Feng Jin sighed and said in a low voice, "We haven't seen each other for a long time. Let's find a place to have a drink or two and get together." Although they were brothers, they hadn't even exchanged many letters since they parted ways in Shangjing, let alone celebrate the new year together. Feng Ju listened to his familiar tone and the corner of his mouth twitched. Second brother, I thought you didn't like to drink? He didn't usually touch alcohol, but now he was telling him to find a place to compete in drinking? Was his second brother possessed by a wandering ghost? Feng Jin pursed his lips and said helplessly, I didn't like to drink in the past, but I have to train my tolerance. The Lord and a group of colleagues were all alcoholics and would drink at every banquet. Feng Jin couldn't possibly be unique and use tea as a substitute for alcohol, right? The two brothers found a place to drink. They set up a warming cauldron and arranged the sauce. The cold wind was blowing outside, and the small hot pot was boiling. The meat slices and dry goods that were thrown in were quickly cooked. Although they were alone, Feng Jin and Feng Ju did not talk about work. They just gathered together to reminisce about their youth. If you have time, remember to write a letter to father and mother,
Feng Jin said. When you left without saying a word, father almost fainted from anger.
Feng Ju nodded. For a moment, he was filled with warmth. It was as if the cauldron in front of him was warming his heart and body. Apart from the Feng brothers, Meng Hang was also sent by Jiang Pengji to visit Huang Song as a messenger. Huang Song asked him to stay for a simple meal, and Meng Hang went to Nie Sun's place. This time, Meng Hang even brought his wife, who had a protruding abdomen. It's easy to add flowers to embroidery, but difficult to provide timely assistance.
If it weren't for Brother Soon and sister-in-law's help, my wife might not have been able to keep her pregnancy.
Meng Hang did not talk about work. He only mentioned the help that Nie Sun and his wife had given them. Now that it was the new year, they naturally had to send generous gifts to Nie Sun and his wife. Otherwise, would they not be ingrates? This was a personal relationship. Nie Sun had no excuse to reject Meng Hang and his wife's goodwill. If there was a first, there would be a second. It was a good start, and it would be convenient for them to come and go in the future. After a simple meal, Meng Hang carefully helped his wife into the carriage and let the coachman drive the carriage away. Although Meng Hang was a gentleman also had a mind. He deliberately let the carriage drive slowly and passed by Yuan Xian's residence. He just happened to pass by Yuan Xian, who had just returned drunk. Yuan Xian's whole body was steaming.
He burped and his eyes were drunk.
Humph. Nie Sun. Burp. This child. He's close to Lu Shi.
Burp.
Chapter 1041. Listening to the sound of the wheels turning, Meng Hang sighed softly. Everyone had their own masters and couldn't help themselves. After everything was settled, he had to seriously apologize to Nie Sun. Right now, he could only harden his heart and bury Nie Sun. Meng Hang and his wife didn't deliberately avoid spies, so this matter quickly reached Huang Song's ears. Cheng Yun and Meng Hang hit it off very well. Huang Song chuckled. He turned to Madame Qi sitting next to him and said, "Considering the time, Madame Cheng Yun's baby isn't small anymore. When she's about to give birth, the war will probably be at its fiercest. The current situation is turbulent and war is on the verge of breaking out. Cheng Yun probably won't be able to stay by his wife's side and wait for Lin Er to be born. Furthermore, Cheng Yun doesn't have any elders at home, and it's his first time being a father, so he's definitely feeling uneasy. To make Cheng Yun feel at ease, please take care of Madame Cheng Yun." Madame Qi's lips curled up and she rolled her eyes at Huang Song. "Lang Jun, are you sure I won't anger Madame Nie into miscarriage if I go take care of her?" Huang Song was dumbfounded and berated her in a low voice. "You're staying up on New Year's Eve. What inauspicious words are you saying?" If Nie Sun heard this, he would think Huang Song and his wife were sinister. Madame Qi held her sleeping youngest son in her left hand and stroked her eldest son's soft hair with her right hand. She rolled her eyes at Huang Song. "I heard Madame Nie is very meticulous. You sent several beauties to Mr. Nie while she was pregnant. If I go, who knows what he'll think? What woman would like to see someone who liked to send concubines to their man?" Many of Huang Song's officials were married, and the wives of various families visited each other. Only Madame Nie Sun was cold. Why was she cold? Wasn't it because Huang Song had repeatedly sent beauties offered by others to Nie Sun's house and angered his legal wife? Huang Song was speechless. He sent beauties for Nie Sun's own good. His wife was pregnant and couldn't move, but a man's physical needs had to be taken care of. Huang Song was like most ancient men. His wife was his wife, and his concubines were just playthings used to vent his physical needs. He couldn't take concubines, but that didn't stop his officials from having 3 or 4 wives. Madame Qi saw through his thoughts and sneered coldly. Huang Song subconsciously shrank his neck. "The children are here, at least give me some face." Ever since the incident last time, Huang Song had become fond of this madam. Lady Qi was too lazy to pay attention to him and concentrated on coaxing her sleepy eldest son. "I'll help you take care of Madame Nie, but don't foolishly send beauties to other couples lest they hold a grudge against me." He heard that Madame Nie was Yu Enjing's beloved daughter. Although she wasn't born into a family of generals, she had a temper. Why would she like to share a man with another woman? If you don't change, there's no harm in thinking about that one from the Huai family. Others learn from their mistakes, but you never learn from them. Madame Qi was a woman, and women understood women the best. Madame Nie rarely interacted with her and always used the excuse that she wasn't feeling well as an excuse to excuse herself. Wasn't it all because Huang Song's actions angered her? At the mention of Madame Fengjue, Huang Song pursed his lips tightly, his eyes filled with accusation. He and Feng Ju were not only emperor and minister, but also close friends who wore the same pants. The Feng family did not arrange for Feng Ju's marriage, but Huang Song, as half a brother, could not ignore it. He had wanted to choose a virtuous and gentle wife for her, but he did not expect his wife to be the one he had chosen. Sigh. It was a long story. Feng Ju made a great contribution, so Huang Song was happy and sent him a pair of rare twin beauties. The aristocrats who fawned on him spent a lot of effort to buy these twin beauties and carefully trained them. Worried that Feng Ju would be too shy to accept them, Huang Song specially ordered someone to send them to his residence. In the end, he even had someone warn Madame Fengjue. The legal wife must be magnanimous and not hold her husband back from taking concubines. The twin beauties were 16 years old. Their faces were full of collagen, and their appearance was full of life. Even if the male master did not use them, they would still be very pleasing to the eyes as decorations at home. Huang Song was just that considerate of his subordinates. And then, Feng Ju was chased out by his wife. Not only that, but Madame Fengjue also stripped the two girls naked and threw them into Huang Song's backyard. No matter how good Huang Song's temper was, there was a limit to it. He immediately flew into a rage and wanted to punish Madame Fengjue. If he did not discipline this woman for Fengjue, wouldn't she go to heaven in the future? Madame Fengjue's temper was the complete opposite of her looks. She was usually quiet, but once she got angry, she could really climb the roof and flip the beams. Madame Fengjue was a tough nut to crack. She said to Huang Song calmly, "I heard that when the emperor is angry, millions of corpses will be laid. When the feudal lords are angry, blood will flow. I don't have such great abilities, but the hatred of stealing my husband is absolutely irreconcilable. Taking a head within 30 feet is also as easy as taking something from my pocket." Huang Song was speechless. The hatred of stealing her husband? Don't say that he and Fengjue had some shameful relationship, okay? He did not do anything. Didn't he just send Fengjue two beauties? How could this be considered the hatred of stealing her husband? Huang Song was angry and furious. What about taking a head within 30 feet? Wasn't that just a threat? What's the matter? I sent a beauty to help her take care of Huaijie. Why is this woman so stubborn? Huang Song was angry, but Fengjue pleaded for mercy for his wife. Huang Song could not ignore Fengjue and really kill Fengjue's wife. In the end, he could only swallow the bitter pill back into his stomach. You can only blame Lanting. If she was a man, these little women in the backyard wouldn't be so arrogant. She's not even willing to let her husband take a concubine. What kind of logic is this? Which man out there doesn't have a sweetheart who can add fragrance to their sleeves? Madame Qi sneered, and Huang Song was instantly silenced. Jiang Pengji's appearance gave Madame Qi, who came from a family of generals, confidence. Madame Qi was also in charge of Huang Song, which indirectly gave the wives of Huang Song's counselors confidence. The lord was henpecked, and most of the officials would also be henpecked. This was the example of the superior following the subordinate's example. However, henpecked and chaste men were in the minority. Most men still liked to have a large number of wives and concubines. For men, money, power, and women were eternal pursuits. Therefore, Huang Song's habit of sending beauties did not get rid of it. If he could not send them to Fengjue to add color to his backyard, he could send them to others. Nie Sun was implicated just like that. It was just that. Huang Song thought of Nie Sun's inexplicable closeness to Meng Hang, and he felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. He asked Madame Qi to take care of Nie Sun's wife. Caring for her subordinates was one thing, and the other was to alienate Nie Sun from Meng Hang. Madame Qi kept watch until midnight and fell into a deep sleep. Huang Song drank lightly under the moon and murmured, "Lanting has too many crafty ideas. I have to be on guard." Huang Song had seen Jiang Pengji's ability to create something out of nothing. He was afraid that Nye soon would fall into her trap. At the end of the night, the sky was bright. The bonfire from last night had been extinguished. White smoke rose in spirals, giving off a sense of desolation. Chapter 1042. Jiang Pengji ran a few laps with her beloved White and her pretty boy. She was drenched in sweat and her cheeks were red. "Your Highness, quickly put it on." Wei Xi frowned and lifted his hand to put the cloak on Jiang Pengji, who had just returned. He was drenched in sweat and had to stay outside in the cold wind. Even if his body was made of iron, he couldn't stand it. Jiang Pengji obediently allowed Wei Xi to drape the cloak over her. "Has my lord eaten breakfast?" "No, I just took Big White and Little White to exercise, so my stomach is empty now." "Did you bring anything in your sleeves, Zixiao?" The clothes of the ancients did not have pockets. After all, those things were not elegant. Instead, they liked to make a fuss in the wide sleeves, which could hide a lot of things. Jiang Pengji's nose was sensitive. She immediately smelled the fragrance of meat in Wei Xi's sleeve. Wei Xi could not help but laugh. He took out a few meat buns wrapped in special oiled paper. "There is still a pot of meat porridge and chopped pickled vegetables in the tent. If my lord is still hungry, I will prepare more." Jiang Pengji smiled and squinted her eyes. The meat buns puffed up her cheeks. "Zixiao is becoming more and more virtuous." After saying this, she immediately asked, "Is there any news from the scouts?" Wei Xi could not be bothered with anything else the moment he asked about official business. "There are signs of the soldiers guarding Hanchang Pass being mobilized. I reckon that there will be movements in the near future." Wei Xi said, "The patience of the defending general is not bad. He has persisted for more than 20 days. If they continue to delay, our army will easily fall into a passive situation." No matter how popular Jiang Pengji was, it could not change the fact that she was a long-distance fighter. Otherwise, why would Jiang Pengji set up a field station in Chongzhou when she attacked the northern borderline? It was all for the sake of shortening the transportation line. The longer the supply line, the more food would be consumed. Not to mention the greater the risk, the military expenditure would also increase exponentially. The tens of thousands of mouths under Jiang Pengji had to eat. It was a terrifying number in one day, let alone 20 days. No matter who they are, they all have the mentality of a gambler. "The difference is in who is more serious," Jiang Pengji said. "The camp security has been lax for more than 20 days. At first, the defending general of Chong Pass suspected that it was a ploy to lure the enemy, but as time went on, his heart began to waver. As long as he grasped this opportunity, he would be able to make a great contribution. Unfortunately, he was timid and stopped moving forward, missing one opportunity after another. As time goes by, even the most cautious person will have the mentality of fighting to the death and gamble fiercely." In the words of the live stream viewers, take a gamble and turn a bicycle into a motorcycle. Everything has to be tried. Who knows, you might win. Jiang Pengji's strategy was psychological warfare, luring the enemy to lead his troops out of seclusion. It was only at this time that the defenses of Chong Pass were at their weakest, and the losses from breaching the pass could be minimized. It wasn't that Jiang Pengji didn't have the confidence to break through the pass head-on, but the casualties were too great. She didn't want the soldiers to sacrifice themselves for Hanchang Pass. It didn't matter if more food was consumed, as long as fewer people died. After eating breakfast and drinking a pot of meat porridge, Jiang Pengji finally felt better. The new year had a new atmosphere, and the military camp still had remnants of the festive atmosphere from the new year. However, it was different over at Chong Pass. Chong Pass did not lack grain, but the garrison general was a stingy person. Why would he squander his wealth to feed the soldiers for the new year? Last night, on New Year's Eve, the soldiers guarding Chong Pass could only stare at the orange bonfires in the distance. It was as if they could smell the mouth-watering smell of roasted meat and fine wine from afar. Others had a joyous new year, but they had to spend the whole night drinking northwest wind at the city walls. The enemy had challenged them for more than 20 days, but the general was still unwilling to fight. The morale of the soldiers at Chong Pass was also affected. The garrison general of Chong Pass hesitated for so many days, and he finally made up his mind to take a gamble. The generals under him complained incessantly. Not only did it affect the overall morale, but it also caused his reputation in the army to plummet. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Lu Shi and Jiang Pengji's camp was loose and undisciplined. If they seized the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, they would definitely reap great rewards.
However, the garrison general insisted on doing things his own way, and he missed one good opportunity after another.
The onlookers were furious. The garrison general was originally hesitant.
Now that he was egged on by his subordinates, the balance in his heart slowly tilted.
Take a gamble.
Perhaps the bicycle would turn into a motorcycle.
Gritting his teeth and steeling his heart, the garrison general of Chong Pass made the decision to mobilize the troops. Once the order was issued, the originally low morale immediately rose. They wished they could grow wings and fight to the death with the enemy. Little did they know that their actions of mobilizing the troops were all seen by the cavalry scouts.
Finally, I can't sit still anymore.
Li Yun had been stifled these days. He felt too tired when he was busy everywhere, but once he was free to eat and enjoy, he felt uncomfortable all over, as if he had nowhere to vent his energy. Now that he could finally fight, it felt great. Huang Song, who received the news, also could not sit still. As long as they successfully broke through Chong Pass and crossed the treacherous river Song, they could directly enter the hinterland of Cangzhou. Jiang Pengji reminded him, act according to the plan, remember not to leak any information.
Huang Song knew the severity of the matter, and he nodded with a solemn face.
The garrison general of Chong Pass chose the first day of the new year, which was the night of the first day. As usual, the two camps lit up with raging bonfires. The security of the camp was lax, and the distribution of the tents was even more messy. Anyone with a bit of experience would know that such tents were a failure. Once there was a surprise attack, the messenger would not be able to immediately inform the entire camp, let alone organize an effective counterattack. The garrison general of Chong Pass was still a little uneasy, but when he saw the messy camp with his own eyes, he sneered coldly in his heart. If he had known that Lu Shi only had this little ability, why would he be so jittery for so long? Sighing in his heart, the garrison general of Chong Pass gathered his unnecessary thoughts and led the troops towards the enemy's camp.
Lu Shi, that's all there is to him. I knew he didn't have the ability, the garrison general of Chong Pass murmured in a low voice.
His face was filled with obvious regret.
Little did he know that no matter when he launched a sneak attack, the seemingly loose camp hid an ambush that he would not be able to return from.
Although Jiang Pengji was confident, this confidence was built on a sufficiently strong foundation. For the past 20 days, it seemed like the entire camp was having fun, but in fact, most of the troops were hidden in the tents, ready for battle. In order to keep the troops in peak condition, she even arranged for them to work in 3 shifts and take turns to put on a show. For example, the camp looked relaxed on the surface, but most of the troops were hidden in the tents, lying in ambush, waiting for the hare to come to them. The garrison general of Chong Pass led 5,000 troops to launch a sneak attack. Although it was said to be a sneak attack, they planned to leave after the battle. However, would the troops, who had been in drought for so long, let them retreat unscathed?
Just as the garrison general of Chong Pass was about to step into the trap, Jiang Pengji and the others led the troops to take a shortcut and went straight to the foot of Chong Pass.
Ah woo! Yawning sleepily, the troops on the top of the city wall rubbed their eyes with their hands. It was the middle of the night, and they were very sleepy, yawning non-stop. What movement? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.